Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to this sacred space of rest and profound inner peace. We are so deeply grateful that you have chosen to join us tonight for this transformative journey into the heart of silence, into the very essence of what it means to find true tranquility in a world that never stops speaking. Before we begin this gentle voyage together, we invite you to take a moment to connect with our global community of peaceful hearts. Please leave a comment below, sharing what time it is where you are and from which corner of our beautiful world you are listening. It brings us such joy to know that as you rest tonight, thousands of other souls across the globe are also finding their way to this same sacred silence, all of us united in this moment of profound peace and shared humanity. Now, dear friend, find your most comfortable position, a position where your body can completely surrender to the gentle embrace of rest. Whether you are lying in your bed, nestled in a favorite chair, or curled up on a soft couch, allow yourself to settle deeply into whatever is supporting you. Feel the solid, reliable presence beneath you, holding you with perfect steadiness and care. Give your full weight over to this support, releasing any need to hold yourself up, any tension in your muscles, any resistance in your body. You are completely safe here. You are perfectly held. You can let go completely. Gently close your eyes now, and as you do, feel the soft curtain of the outer world drawing closed around you. The demands of the day, the noise of thoughts, the endless chatter of a busy mind, all of this begins to fade away like distant echoes. Take a long, slow, deep breath in through your nose, drawing in not just air, but peace itself. Imagine you are breathing in a soft, silvery light, cool and clean and infinitely calming. Feel this peaceful light filling your lungs, your chest, your entire being. And as you exhale, release everything that is not peace. Let go of the conversations that replay in your mind, the worries about tomorrow, the regrets about yesterday. Release them all with a gentle, quiet sigh, like leaves floating away on a calm, slow-moving stream. Take another deep, cleansing breath, and this time, as you exhale, consciously release any tension you may be holding in your physical body. Begin with your face, that place where so much of our daily stress accumulates. Let your jaw go completely slack, allowing your mouth to fall slightly open if it wants to. Release any tightness around your eyes, any furrows in your brow. Let your entire face become soft, peaceful, and completely relaxed. Now let this wave of relaxation flow down into your neck and shoulders. Feel your shoulders dropping away from your ears, releasing the invisible burdens they have been carrying. Allow your arms to become heavy and loose, your hands to rest open and soft. Feel the relaxation flowing down through your torso, into your hips, down your legs, all the way to the tips of your toes. Your entire body is now in a state of deep, profound, and perfect rest. Tonight, we are going to embark on a journey that will take us far from the noise and chaos of the modern world, far from the endless stream of words and sounds that fill our daily lives. We are going to travel to a place of sacred silence, a place where the deepest truths of existence can finally be heard, where the soul can remember its true nature, and where the mind can find the peace it has been seeking all along. This is not just a story about silence. This is an invitation to experience the transformative power of quietude, to discover the profound wisdom that emerges only when we stop talking and start truly listening to the whisper of our own hearts. Our journey begins in ancient India, in a time when the world moved at the pace of walking feet and the rhythm of natural seasons. The air is warm and fragrant with jasmine and sandalwood, and the golden light of late afternoon filters through the leaves of ancient banyan trees. In the heart of a vast and peaceful forest, far from any village or city, stands a simple monastery made of weathered stone and carved wood. This is a place where time seems to move differently, where the urgent demands of the world fade away, and where the only sounds are the gentle whisper of wind through leaves, the distant call of birds, and the soft footsteps of monks walking in meditation. Here, in this sanctuary of silence, lives a Buddhist monk whose reputation for wisdom and inner peace has spread throughout all of India. His name is Venerable Thichan, and though he is still young in years, his eyes hold the depth of ancient understanding. He has spent the last 15 years of his life in almost complete silence, speaking only when absolutely necessary, and in that silence, he has discovered treasures of wisdom that no amount of study or conversation could ever have revealed. His very presence radiates a profound tranquility that touches everyone who encounters him. When he walks, it is as if he moves through the world without disturbing it. When he sits, he seems to become one with the earth itself, and when he does speak, his words carry the weight of deep truth and the gentleness of infinite compassion. The monastery where Venerable Thichan lives is a place of extraordinary beauty and simplicity. The buildings are arranged around a central courtyard where a small fountain bubbles quietly, its gentle sound creating a constant, soothing backdrop to the silence. Gardens of medicinal herbs and flowering plants surround the buildings, tended with loving care by the monks who understand that working with the earth is itself a form of meditation. Ancient trees provide shade and shelter, their massive trunks and spreading branches creating natural cathedrals of green light and shadow. Stone pathways wind through the grounds, worn smooth by centuries of contemplative footsteps, leading to quiet alcoves and meditation spots where one can sit and simply be. The daily rhythm of life in this monastery is like a gentle, sacred dance. The monks rise before dawn, not to the harsh sound of alarms, but to the soft ringing of a meditation bell that seems to call them from sleep, like a loving parent waking a child. They gather in silence for morning meditation, sitting together in the main hall as the first light of day begins to filter through the windows. There is no talking, no discussion, no analysis, just the shared experience of breathing together, of being present together, of touching the infinite peace that lies at the heart of all existence. After meditation, they eat a simple breakfast in continued silence, each bite taken with mindfulness and gratitude. Then they go about their daily tasks, gardening, cleaning, studying, copying sacred texts, all done in the same spirit of meditative awareness, all performed as acts of devotion and love. It is into this world of sacred silence that our story truly begins. One morning, as the sun is just beginning to rise over the forest canopy, casting long golden rays through the mist that clings to the trees, a magnificent procession approaches the monastery gates. At the head of this procession rides King Devendra, one of the most powerful rulers in all of India. His elephant is decorated with silk and gold. His retinue includes hundreds of soldiers and servants, and the sound of their approach, the trumpeting of elephants, the jingling of harnesses, the voices of men calling out orders shatters the peaceful silence of the forest, like stones thrown into a still pond. King Devendra is a man who has everything that the world considers valuable. His kingdom stretches for hundreds of miles in every direction. His palaces are filled with treasures from across the known world, precious gems, works of art, libraries of ancient texts, gardens of exotic plants and flowers. He has 100 wives, each more beautiful than the last, and children who are being raised to be princes and princesses of extraordinary accomplishment. His armies are vast and well-trained. His treasury is overflowing with gold and silver, and his name is spoken with respect and fear throughout the land. By every external measure, King Devendra should be the happiest man alive. But as he dismounts from his elephant at the gates of the monastery, his face tells a different story. Despite all his wealth and power, despite all his achievements and possessions, King Devendra looks like a man who is drowning in his own success. His eyes are restless and troubled, darting constantly from one thing to another, never able to rest or focus. His hands shake slightly, not from age or illness, but from a deep, internal agitation that no amount of luxury has been able to calm. His voice, when he speaks to his servants, is sharp and impatient, the voice of a man who is constantly frustrated, constantly seeking something that he cannot name or find. He has come to this remote monastery because he has heard rumors of a monk who possesses something that all his wealth cannot buy: true peace of mind. The monastery gates are simple wooden doors, worn smooth by weather and time, with no guards or elaborate decorations. King Devendra, accustomed to the grand entrances of palaces and temples, seems almost confused by this simplicity. He knocks, and after a long moment, the gates are opened by a young novice monk, whose face radiates the same calm presence that seems to permeate the entire monastery. The novice bows respectfully but says nothing, simply gesturing for the king to enter. The contrast between the noisy, elaborate world that the king has brought with him and the profound silence that greets him inside the monastery walls is so stark that it stops him in his tracks. For a moment, King Devendra simply stands there, surrounded by his retinue of soldiers and servants, all of them unconsciously lowering their voices in response to the sacred atmosphere of the place. The king looks around at the simple buildings, the peaceful gardens, the monks who move through their daily tasks with such grace and mindfulness, and for the first time in years, he feels something that he had almost forgotten existed: a sense of genuine peace. It is as if the very air of this place carries a quality of tranquility that begins to calm his agitated spirit, even before he has spoken to anyone. The novice monk leads King Devendra through the monastery grounds, past the meditation hall, where dozens of monks sit in perfect stillness, past the gardens, where others tend to plants with the same careful attention that they bring to their prayers, past the library, where ancient texts are being copied by hand with exquisite care and precision. With each step, the king feels the noise and chaos of his usual world falling away, replaced by something deeper and more nourishing than anything he has ever experienced. It is as if he is walking into a different dimension of existence, a place where the rules that govern his normal life no longer apply. Finally, they arrive at a small, simple building at the far edge of the monastery grounds. This is the residence of Venerable Tichan, and it is a study in elegant simplicity. The building is made of natural wood and stone, with large windows that look out onto a private garden where bamboo grows tall and straight, creating a natural screen that filters the light into soft green patterns. Inside, the rooms are sparsely furnished with just the essentials: a simple bed, a low table for eating and writing, cushions for meditation, and shelves lined with well-worn books of spiritual wisdom. There are no decorations, except for a few carefully chosen objects: a small statue of the Buddha, a vase that usually holds a single flower, a piece of calligraphy that reads simply, "Be still and know." Venerable Tichan is sitting in meditation when they arrive, his posture perfectly erect, but completely relaxed, his breathing so quiet and natural that he seems to have become one with the silence around him. His face is peaceful beyond description, not the peace of someone who has avoided life's challenges, but the peace of someone who has faced them all and found something unshakable at the core of his being. When he opens his eyes to greet his visitor, there is no surprise, no disturbance, no change in his fundamental tranquility. It is as if he has been expecting this moment, as if the arrival of this troubled king is simply another part of the natural flow of existence. King Devendra, accustomed to elaborate ceremonies and formal protocols, finds himself at a loss for how to begin. In his palaces, every encounter is choreographed. Every conversation follows established patterns of courtesy and hierarchy. But here, in the presence of this simple monk who owns nothing but radiates everything, all of those familiar structures seem suddenly meaningless. The king stands there for a long moment, feeling the weight of his own agitation, in contrast to the profound stillness of the monk. And then, almost without meaning to, he begins to speak from his heart. "Venerable Master," he says, his voice carrying a note of desperation that surprises even himself. "I have come to you because I am drowning in my own success. I have everything that a man could possibly want: wealth beyond measure, power that extends across vast territories, pleasures that most people can only dream of. My palaces are filled with the most beautiful objects. My tables groan under the weight of the finest foods. My days are filled with entertainment and luxury. And yet, Master, I am the most miserable man alive. My mind is like a wild horse that I cannot tame, constantly racing from one thought to another, never finding rest, never finding peace. I wake up each morning feeling as if I have not slept at all, and I go to bed each night with my thoughts spinning like leaves in a whirlwind." The king pauses, his hands trembling slightly as he continues. "I have consulted with the wisest advisors, the most learned scholars, the most skilled physicians. I have tried every pleasure, every distraction, every remedy that wealth can buy. I have built temples and given away fortunes to charity, thinking that perhaps good deeds would bring me the peace I seek. But nothing works, Master. Nothing brings me even a moment of true tranquility. I feel as if I am trapped in a prison of my own making, surrounded by everything I thought I wanted, but unable to enjoy any of it because my mind will not be still. Please, if you have any wisdom, any technique, any practice that can help me, I am willing to do whatever it takes. I will give you half my kingdom, all my treasures, anything you ask, if you can just show me how to find peace." Venerable Tich, and listens to this outpouring with perfect attention, his eyes never leaving the king's face, his expression radiating a compassion so deep and genuine that the king feels seen and understood in a way that he has never experienced before. When the king finishes speaking, the monk remains silent for a long time, not the awkward silence of someone who doesn't know what to say, but the rich, full silence of someone who is allowing the truth of the moment to reveal itself. The silence stretches on, and gradually, the king begins to feel something shifting inside him. Just being in the presence of this profound quietude, he notices that his own internal chatter is beginning to slow down. His breathing is becoming deeper and more natural, and a small space of calm is opening up in the center of his chest. Finally, Venerable Tikan speaks, his voice so soft that the king has to lean forward to hear him, yet carrying such clarity and authority that every word seems to resonate in the depths of his being. "Your Majesty," he says, "you have just described the condition of almost every human being on this earth. You are not alone in your suffering, nor are you unusual in your search for peace. The only difference between you and most others is that you have the honesty to acknowledge your pain and the courage to seek a solution. Most people spend their entire lives running from the very feelings that you have just described, distracting themselves with endless activities and acquisitions, never stopping long enough to face the fundamental restlessness that drives them." The monk pauses, allowing his words to sink in before continuing. "You ask me for a technique, a practice, a remedy that you can add to all the other things you have tried. But I must tell you, Your Majesty, that what you seek cannot be found by adding something to your life. It can only be found by taking something away. The peace you long for is not something that needs to be created or acquired. It is something that is already present within you, but it is buried under layers of noise, distraction, and constant mental activity. The solution is not to do more, but to do less. Not to speak more, but to speak less. Not to think more, but to allow your thoughts to settle into their natural state of stillness. King Devendra looks puzzled, his brow furrowing as he tries to understand this paradoxical teaching. "But Master," he says, "I am a king. My life requires constant decision-making, constant communication, constant action. How can I possibly do less? My kingdom would fall into chaos if I were to withdraw from my responsibilities. My advisors need my guidance. My subjects need my leadership. My enemies would take advantage of any sign of weakness. Surely there must be some other way, some practice I can add to my existing routine that will bring me peace without requiring me to abandon my duties." Venerable Thick, and smiles gently, a smile that holds both understanding and a kind of loving challenge. "Your Majesty," he says, "what if I told you that by learning to be truly silent, truly still, you would become not a weaker king, but a stronger one? What if I told you that by speaking less, your words would carry more weight? What if I told you that by doing less, you would accomplish more? Would you be willing to trust in this possibility, even if it goes against everything you have been taught about leadership and success?" The king is quiet for a long moment, struggling with the implications of what the monk is suggesting. Everything in his training, his education, his experience as a ruler tells him that leadership requires constant activity, constant communication, constant visibility. The idea of stepping back, of becoming quiet, of allowing silence to play a role in his governance seems not just foreign, but potentially dangerous. And yet, there is something in the monk's presence, something in the profound peace that radiates from him, that suggests he might possess a wisdom that transcends conventional understanding. "I am willing to try," the king says finally, his voice carrying a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "But I must confess, Master, that I do not even know what true silence means. My mind is so accustomed to constant chatter, constant planning, constant analysis, that I cannot imagine what it would be like to be truly quiet. Even when I am alone, even when no one else is speaking, there is an endless stream of thoughts running through my head. How does one learn to be silent when silence feels so foreign, so uncomfortable, so impossible?" "Ah," says Venerable Thick An, his eyes lighting up with the joy of a teacher who has found the perfect opportunity to share a profound truth. "Now you are asking the right question, Your Majesty. You are beginning to understand that silence is not simply the absence of sound, but a positive state of being that must be cultivated with the same care and attention that you would give to any other skill. True silence is not something that happens automatically when we stop talking. It is a deep, rich, nourishing state of consciousness that emerges when we learn to let go of our compulsive need to fill every moment with mental activity." The monk gestures toward the cushions on the floor, inviting the king to sit. As they settle into comfortable positions facing each other, the quality of silence in the room seems to deepen, becoming almost tangible, like a presence that surrounds and embraces them. "Your Majesty," the monk continues, "I would like to propose an experiment. It is not a technique or a practice in the conventional sense, but rather an invitation to discover something that you already possess but have never learned to access. Are you willing to trust me enough to try something that may seem strange or even impossible at first?" King Devendra nods, his curiosity overcoming his skepticism. There is something about this monk's presence that inspires confidence, a sense that he is in the company of someone who has discovered secrets that are worth any amount of discomfort or uncertainty. "I am ready, Master," he says. "Tell me what I must do." For the next 21 days, Venerable Thich An says, his voice carrying the weight of a sacred commitment, you will remain here, in this monastery, as my guest. You will live as we live simply, quietly, with minimal possessions and minimal distractions. But most importantly, you will practice the discipline of sacred silence. This does not mean that you will never speak at all, but it means that you will speak only when absolutely necessary. And when you do speak, you will do so with great care and intention. You will discover what it means to listen not just to others, but to the deeper currents of life that can only be heard when the surface chatter of the mind becomes quiet. The king feels a flutter of panic at the thought of being away from his kingdom for 3 weeks, but something deeper than his fear recognizes the wisdom in this proposal. But master, he says, what about my kingdom? What about my responsibilities? My advisors will not know what to do without my constant guidance. My enemies may take advantage of my absence. How can I justify abandoning my duties for so long? Venerable Thich An's smile deepens, and there is a twinkle of gentle humor in his eyes. Your Majesty, he says, what if I told you that your kingdom has been running quite well for many years, despite your constant worry and micromanagement? Not because of it. What if I told you that your advisors are more capable than you give them credit for, and that your constant interference may actually be preventing them from doing their best work? What if I told you that the greatest gift you could give your kingdom is to return to it as a ruler who has learned the power of true leadership? Leadership that comes not from frantic activity, but from deep wisdom and unshakable inner peace. These words hit the king like a gentle but powerful wave, washing over his preconceptions and revealing truths that he has never allowed himself to consider. He realizes that much of his constant activity, his endless meetings and decisions and interventions, may indeed be driven more by his own anxiety and need for control than by the actual needs of his kingdom. The possibility that he could serve his people better by learning to be still, to listen more deeply, to speak with greater wisdom and less frequency, begins to seem not just possible but necessary. I will do it, he says, his voice carrying a new note of determination mixed with humility. I will trust in your wisdom, Master, and I will commit to these 21 days of silence and simplicity. But I must ask, what exactly will I be doing during this time? How will I spend my days? What practices will you teach me? The most important practice, Venerable Thich An replies, is the practice of simply being present with whatever arises, without the need to fix it, change it, analyze it, or escape from it. You will wake each morning before dawn and join us for meditation. You will eat simple meals in silence, paying attention to the taste, texture, and nourishment of each bite. You will spend time in the gardens, working with your hands, feeling the earth, observing the natural rhythms of growth and decay. You will walk slowly through the forest, listening to the sounds of birds and wind and water, allowing your nervous system to remember what it feels like to move at the pace of nature rather than the pace of human ambition. The monk pauses, allowing the king to absorb this vision of a completely different way of living. Most importantly, he continues, you will spend several hours each day in complete solitude, sitting quietly with no agenda, no goal, no task to accomplish. This may be the most difficult part of the practice for you, because your mind is so accustomed to constant stimulation and activity. But it is in these periods of solitude that the real transformation happens. It is here that you will discover what lies beneath the surface chatter of your thoughts, what remains when all the noise falls away. King Devendra feels both excited and terrified by this prospect. The idea of spending hours each day with no agenda, no entertainment, no distractions, seems almost impossible to imagine. His mind is already racing ahead, trying to figure out how he will fill the time, what he will think about, how he will keep himself occupied. But he also senses that this very anxiety, this compulsive need to fill every moment with activity, is precisely what the monk is inviting him to examine and ultimately transcend. "I understand, Master," he says, "and I commit to following your guidance completely. But I must ask, what can I expect to happen during these 21 days? What changes might I experience? How will I know if the practice is working?" Venerable Thich Ann's expression becomes even more gentle and compassionate. "Your Majesty," he says, "I cannot tell you exactly what you will experience, because each person's journey into silence is unique. But I can tell you that the changes, when they come, will be unmistakable. You may find that your sleep becomes deeper and more restful. You may discover that your appetite changes, that simple foods taste more delicious than the most elaborate feasts. You may notice that your breathing becomes slower and more natural, that your heartbeat settles into a calmer rhythm, that the constant tension in your muscles begins to release." The monk's voice takes on an even more profound quality as he continues. But the most important changes will be internal. You may find that the constant stream of thoughts in your mind begins to slow down, like a river that has been rushing and turbulent, gradually becoming calm and clear. You may discover that you can observe your thoughts and emotions without being overwhelmed by them, like watching clouds pass across the sky without being caught up in the storm. You may experience moments of profound peace that seem to arise from nowhere, moments when you feel connected to something vast and eternal that has always been present but has been hidden by the noise of daily life. King Devendra listens to these words with growing wonder and anticipation. The possibility of experiencing such peace, such clarity, such freedom from the constant agitation that has plagued him for so long seems almost too good to be true. And yet, sitting here in the presence of this monk who clearly embodies everything he is describing, the king begins to believe that such transformation might actually be possible. "When do we begin?" he asks, his voice carrying a new note of eagerness and commitment. "We begin now," Venerable Thich Ann replies with a smile. "The first step is to inform your retinue that you will be staying here for the next 3 weeks, and that they should return to the kingdom with instructions for your advisors to handle all routine matters in your absence. Any truly urgent issues can be brought to you here, but I suspect you will find that very few things are as urgent as they seem when viewed from a place of inner stillness." The king nods and rises to go speak with his servants and soldiers. As he walks back through the monastery grounds to where his entourage is waiting, he is struck by how different everything looks and feels already. The same buildings, the same gardens, the same pathways that he walked just an hour ago now seem to glow with a different quality of light. The sounds of the monastery, the gentle splash of the fountain, the whisper of wind through bamboo, the distant chanting of monks at their evening prayers seem to penetrate more deeply into his awareness, as if his senses are already beginning to open to subtleties that he had never noticed before. When he reaches his entourage, King Devendra is surprised to find that the words come easily. He explains to his captain of guards and his chief advisor that he will be remaining at the monastery for 3 weeks to study with Venerable Thich Ann, and that they should return to the kingdom with his instructions for managing affairs in his absence. He is amazed to discover that as he speaks, his voice is calmer and more authoritative than usual, and his instructions are clearer and more decisive. It is as if the brief time he has spent in the monk's presence has already begun to affect the way he communicates. His advisors express concern about leaving him alone in such a remote place, but the king reassures them with a confidence that surprises even himself. "I am not alone," he says. "I am in the company of one of the wisest teachers in all of India, and I am about to embark on the most important learning of my life. Trust that this time away from the kingdom will ultimately make me a better ruler, better able to serve our people with wisdom and compassion." As his entourage prepares to depart, King Devendra feels a mixture of emotions. There is anxiety about being separated from the familiar structures and routines of his royal life, but there is also a sense of relief, as if he is finally giving himself permission to step away from the relentless demands that have been consuming his life. As the sounds of elephants and horses and human voices gradually fade into the distance, the profound silence of the monastery settles around him like a gentle embrace. That evening, King Devendra joins the monks for their simple dinner, eaten in complete silence in the main dining hall. The meal consists of rice, vegetables, and lentils, prepared with care, but without elaborate seasonings or presentations. As the king takes his first bite, he is amazed to discover how much flavor and satisfaction can be found in such simple food when it is eaten with complete attention and gratitude, without the distraction of conversation, without the need to maintain royal protocol or engage in diplomatic small talk. He finds himself truly tasting his food for the first time in years. After dinner, Venerable Thich invites the king to join him for a walking meditation in the monastery gardens. They move slowly along the stone pathways, their footsteps soft and deliberate, their breathing synchronized with their movement. The monk explains that this is not simply a walk, but a practice of bringing complete awareness to each step, each breath, each moment of contact between foot and earth. Walking meditation, he says softly, teaches us that every moment of life can be a meditation if we bring the right quality of attention to it. As they walk, the king becomes aware of sensations and experiences that he has never noticed before. He feels the texture of the stone beneath his feet, the gentle pressure of air against his skin, the subtle fragrances of night-blooming flowers. He hears the soft rustle of leaves, the distant call of a nightbird, the almost inaudible sound of his own breathing. It is as if his senses are waking up from a long sleep, becoming more alive and receptive to the richness of the present moment. When they return to Venerable Thich residence, the monk shows the king to a small, simple room that will be his home for the next 3 weeks. The room contains only the essentials: a narrow bed with clean, simple bedding, a small table and chair, a cushion for meditation, and a window that looks out onto the bamboo garden. There are no decorations, no luxury items, no reminders of his royal status. The king looks around at this sparse accommodation and feels, to his surprise, not deprivation, but relief. It is as if he is being freed from the burden of maintaining and managing all the elaborate possessions that have filled his palaces. Tomorrow, Venerable Thich says, we will begin your formal practice. You will wake before dawn when you hear the meditation bell, and you will join us in the main hall for morning sitting. After breakfast, you will spend 2 hours in solitary meditation in your room. Then you will work in the gardens for 2 hours, followed by lunch and a rest period. In the afternoon, you will have another period of solitary meditation, followed by walking meditation and evening prayers. The schedule may seem simple, but I assure you that it will provide all the structure you need for deep transformation. That night, as King Devendra lies in his simple bed, he is aware of how different this environment is from his usual sleeping arrangements. There are no silk sheets, no elaborate canopy, no servants standing by to attend to his every need. And yet, as he settles into the quiet darkness, he finds that his body relaxes more completely than it has in years. The absence of luxury is somehow more luxurious than luxury itself, because it allows him to experience the simple pleasure of rest without any complications or distractions. The first few days of the king's retreat are challenging in ways he had not anticipated. When the meditation bell rings before dawn on his first morning, his mind immediately begins its familiar routine of planning and worrying. As he sits in the meditation hall with dozens of monks, all of them perfectly still and serene, His thoughts race from one concern to another. He worries about what is happening in his kingdom, whether his advisors are making the right decisions, whether his enemies are taking advantage of his absence. He thinks about all the meetings he is missing, all the documents that need his attention, all the problems that require his immediate intervention. But gradually, as the minutes pass in silence, something begins to shift. The very act of sitting still, of not responding to every thought that arises, starts to create a small space of calm in the center of the mental storm. The king begins to notice that his thoughts are not facts, but simply mental events that arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. He doesn't need to believe every thought, follow every worry, or solve every problem that his mind presents to him. He can simply observe the activity of his mind with a kind of gentle, detached curiosity. The periods of solitary meditation in his room are even more challenging. Without the supportive presence of the other monks, without any external structure or guidance, the king finds himself face to face with the full intensity of his mental restlessness. His mind seems to become even more active when he tries to be still, generating an endless stream of thoughts, memories, plans, and fantasies. Sometimes he feels so agitated that he wants to jump up and pace around the room, or find some task to occupy his hands and mind. But Venerable Thich An has prepared him for this difficulty. The mind is like a jar of muddy water, the monk had explained. When you shake the jar, the water becomes cloudy and you cannot see through it. But when you set the jar down and leave it alone, the mud gradually settles to the bottom and the water becomes clear. Your mind has been shaken by years of constant activity. Now you are learning to set it down and allow the mud to settle. This process takes time and patience, but the clarity that emerges is worth any amount of temporary discomfort. Remembering these words, the king learns to sit with his restlessness without trying to fix it or escape from it. He begins to understand that the goal is not to stop thinking, but to change his relationship with his thoughts. Instead of being carried away by every mental event, he can learn to observe his thoughts with the same detached interest that he might watch fish swimming in a pond. The thoughts are there, they are active, but they don't have to control his emotional state or determine his actions. The work in the monastery gardens provides a different kind of teaching. King Devendra, who has never done physical labor in his life, finds himself assigned to simple tasks like weeding, watering plants, and harvesting vegetables. At first, his royal pride rebels against this menial work. He is a king, accustomed to giving orders and having others carry them out. The idea of getting his hands dirty, of bending over to pull weeds, of carrying water buckets, seems beneath his dignity. But as he begins to work alongside the monks, who approach their gardening tasks with the same meditative awareness that they bring to their formal sitting practice, the king discovers something unexpected. There is a profound satisfaction in working with his hands, in feeling the earth between his fingers, in seeing the immediate results of his efforts. When he pulls a weed, the plant bed becomes cleaner and more beautiful. When he waters a wilting plant, he can see it respond with renewed vitality. When he harvests ripe vegetables, he is participating directly in the cycle of nourishment that sustains all life. More importantly, he discovers that physical work can be a form of meditation in itself. When he brings complete attention to the task at hand, when he focuses entirely on the sensation of his hands in the soil or the rhythm of his breathing as he works, his mind naturally becomes quiet and focused. The endless stream of worries and plans that usually occupies his consciousness fades into the background, replaced by a simple, direct engagement with the present moment. As the days pass, King Devendra begins to notice subtle but significant changes in his experience. His sleep becomes deeper and more restful. He finds that he dreams less frequently, and when he does dream, his dreams are more peaceful and less anxious. He wakes up feeling genuinely refreshed, rather than tired and overwhelmed by the day ahead. His appetite changes as well. The simple, vegetarian meals of the monastery, which at first seem bland and insufficient, begin to taste more delicious and satisfying than the elaborate feasts he is accustomed to in his palace. His body begins to relax in ways that he had forgotten were possible. The chronic tension in his shoulders and neck, the result of years of stress and anxiety, starts to release. His breathing becomes slower and deeper, no longer the shallow, rapid breathing of a man who is constantly on edge. His hands stop trembling, his jaw unclenches, and the furrows of worry in his brow begin to smooth out. But the most remarkable changes are happening in his mind and heart. The constant chatter of thoughts that has plagued him for so long begins to slow down and become less compulsive. He discovers that he can choose which thoughts to follow and which to let pass by. He learns to distinguish between thoughts that are useful and productive and thoughts that are simply mental noise, repetitive patterns that serve no purpose except to keep his mind agitated. More importantly, he begins to experience moments of profound peace that seem to arise spontaneously, without any effort on his part. These moments usually come during his meditation periods, but sometimes they occur while he is working in the garden, or walking along the forest paths, or simply sitting quietly in his room. In these moments, all mental activity seems to cease, and he experiences a deep, vast silence that is not empty, but full of a kind of luminous presence. It is as if he is touching something eternal and unchanging that has always been present within him, but has been hidden by the noise and activity of his ordinary consciousness. During these experiences, all of his usual concerns and anxieties seem to dissolve. The problems that normally occupy his mind, the management of his kingdom, the threats from his enemies, the endless decisions that require his attention, don't disappear, but they lose their urgency and their power to disturb his peace. He sees them as temporary, surface phenomena, like waves on the ocean, while he rests in the deep, unchanging stillness that lies beneath all the movement and activity of life. By the end of the second week, King Devendra has become a different person. His face has lost the tight, anxious expression that had become his permanent mask. His eyes, which had been restless and troubled, now hold a depth of calm that reflects the inner transformation he has undergone. His movements have become slower and more graceful, no longer driven by the frantic energy of a man who is constantly rushing to keep up with his own thoughts. When he does speak, which is now much less frequently, his words carry a weight and clarity that they had never possessed before. The other monks in the monastery have noticed these changes, though they are too polite and respectful to comment directly, but the king can see in their eyes a recognition and acceptance that had not been there when he first arrived. He is no longer a foreign intruder in their peaceful world, but a fellow traveler on the path of inner discovery. Venerable Tich An, who has been observing the king's progress with the careful attention of a master gardener watching a plant grow, decides that it is time for a deeper teaching. On the morning of the 15th day, instead of sending the king to his usual solitary meditation, the monk invites him to join him for a special session in his private meditation garden. This garden is a place of extraordinary beauty and tranquility, hidden behind the monk's residence and known only to a few senior students. It is designed according to ancient principles of sacred geometry, with pathways that spiral inward toward a central meditation pavilion, and plantings that create a natural mandala of colors and textures. A small stream runs through the garden, its gentle sound providing a constant, soothing background to the silence. Ancient stones, worn smooth by centuries of weather, are placed at strategic points, to serve as natural seats for contemplation. As they settle into comfortable positions in the central pavilion, Venerable Thichan begins to speak in a voice that is even softer and more penetrating than usual. "Your Majesty," he says, "you have made remarkable progress in these past 2 weeks. You have discovered something that most people never find in their entire lives, the peace that lies at the heart of your own being. But now I want to share with you a deeper teaching, something that will help you understand not just how to find this peace, but how to maintain it when you return to your kingdom and resume your responsibilities as a ruler." The king listens with complete attention, his mind now trained to receive wisdom without the interference of mental commentary or analysis. He has learned to listen not just with his ears, but with his entire being, allowing the monk's words to penetrate directly into his heart and consciousness. "The peace you have discovered," the monk continues, "is not something that you have created through your meditation practice. It is not something that you have earned or achieved. It is something that has always been present within you, but has been covered over by layers of mental activity, emotional reactivity, and compulsive behavior. The practice of silence has not given you something new. It has simply removed the obstacles that were preventing you from experiencing what was already there." This teaching strikes the king with the force of a profound revelation. He realizes that the monk is absolutely right. The peace he has been experiencing doesn't feel like something foreign or artificial that he has imposed upon his consciousness. It feels like coming home to himself, like remembering something he had always known but had somehow forgotten. It is as if he has been living in a house with all the curtains drawn, and the practice of silence has simply opened the curtains to let in the light that was always shining outside. This understanding, Venerable Thich-an continues, is crucial for your future as a ruler. You might think that when you return to your kingdom, with all its demands and distractions, you will lose this peace and return to your old patterns of anxiety and restlessness. But this is not necessarily true. The peace you have discovered is not dependent on external circumstances. It is not something that can be taken away by noise or activity or stress. It is the very foundation of your being, and once you have learned to access it, you can return to it no matter what is happening around you. The king feels a surge of hope mixed with uncertainty. "But Master," he says, "how is this possible? When I return to my palace, I will be surrounded by advisors demanding my attention, subjects bringing me their problems, enemies threatening my borders. How can I maintain this inner silence in the midst of such chaos?" Venerable Thich, and smiles with the gentle confidence of someone who has faced and resolved this exact challenge. "Your Majesty," he says, "the key is to understand that external silence and internal silence are 2 different things. External silence, the absence of sound and activity, is a useful tool for learning to access your inner peace. But internal silence, the deep stillness of consciousness itself, can be maintained even in the midst of great activity and noise. In fact, when you learn to rest in this inner silence, you will find that you can engage with the world more effectively, not less." The monk pauses to let this paradoxical teaching sink in before continuing. Think of it this way: when a lake is calm and still, it perfectly reflects the sky above it. But when the surface is disturbed by wind and waves, the reflection becomes fragmented and unclear. Your consciousness is like that lake. When it is agitated by constant mental activity, it cannot clearly reflect the situations and people you encounter. But when you learn to maintain inner stillness, your awareness becomes like a perfectly calm lake, able to reflect everything with perfect clarity and respond with perfect wisdom. This metaphor resonates deeply with the king's own experience. He realizes that during his most peaceful moments in the monastery, his perception has indeed become clearer and more accurate. He has been able to see situations without the distortion of his own anxiety and preconceptions. He has been able to listen to others without the interference of his own mental commentary. He has been able to make decisions from a place of calm wisdom rather than reactive emotion. But how do I maintain this clarity when I am surrounded by people who are themselves agitated and demanding? The king asks. How do I keep from being pulled back into the old patterns of reactivity and stress? How do I keep? This is where the real practice begins. Venerable Thich An replies, what you have learned here in the monastery is like learning to swim in a calm pond. Now, you must learn to maintain your inner balance even when you are swimming in rough seas. The key is to remember that you always have a choice about how to respond to any situation. You can react from a place of anxiety and compulsion, or you can respond from a place of inner stillness and wisdom. The circumstances don't determine your response. Your level of consciousness determines your response. The monk's voice takes on an even more profound quality as he shares what is clearly one of his most important teachings. When you return to your kingdom, you will find that your subjects and advisors will try to pull you back into the old patterns of frantic activity and constant communication. They are accustomed to a king who is always available, always reactive, always ready to solve every problem immediately. But you now have the opportunity to model a different kind of leadership. Leadership that comes from depth rather than surface activity, from wisdom rather than mere cleverness, from inner authority rather than external force. King Devendra feels both excited and intimidated by this vision of a new kind of kingship. Can you give me some practical guidance, Master? How do I implement this understanding in the day-to-day reality of ruling a kingdom? Certainly, the monk replies. First, you must establish a daily practice of silence, just as you have done here. Even if it is only for 30 minutes each morning, you must create a space in your schedule for meditation and inner renewal. This is not a luxury or an indulgence. It is as essential as eating or sleeping. Without this daily return to your inner source, you will gradually lose touch with the peace you have discovered here. The king nods, already planning how he can restructure his morning routine to include this essential practice. The monk continues. Second, you must learn to pause before responding to any situation that triggers your old patterns of reactivity. When an advisor brings you an urgent problem, when a messenger arrives with disturbing news, when you feel the familiar surge of anxiety or anger, take a moment to return to your breath, to reconnect with your inner stillness before you speak or act. This pause may last only a few seconds, but it can make the difference between a wise response and a reactive one. This practical advice feels immediately useful to the king. He can already imagine how different his interactions would be if he could remember to pause and center himself before responding to challenging situations. The monk continues with his guidance. Third, you must learn to speak less and listen more. You will find that when you speak from a place of inner silence, your words carry much more weight and authority than when you speak from agitation or compulsion. People will pay more attention to what you say because they will sense the depth and authenticity behind your words. And when you listen from a place of stillness, you will hear not just the words that people speak, but the deeper needs and concerns that lie beneath their words. The king realizes that this teaching addresses one of his greatest challenges as a ruler. He has always felt the need to have an immediate answer to every question, an instant solution to every problem. But he is beginning to understand that sometimes the wisest response is to listen deeply, to allow silence to create space for new understanding to emerge, rather than rushing to fill every moment with words and activity. Finally, Venerable Thich An concludes, you must remember that your primary responsibility as a king is not to solve every problem or control every outcome. but to maintain your own inner clarity and wisdom so that you can respond to whatever arises with appropriate action. When you are centered in your own peace, you become a source of stability and calm for everyone around you. Your inner state affects the entire kingdom in ways that you may never fully understand, but that are more powerful than any law you could enact or any army you could deploy. These words strike the king as a complete revolution in his understanding of leadership and power. He has always thought of kingship as a burden of constant activity and decision-making, a role that required him to be everything to everyone and to have solutions for every problem. But now, he is beginning to see that true leadership might be more about being than doing, more about the quality of consciousness he brings to his role than the quantity of actions he takes. As the final week of his retreat unfolds, King Devendra dedicates himself to integrating these teachings into his understanding and experience. He continues his formal meditation practice, but now he also begins to experiment with maintaining his inner stillness during conversations with the monks, during his work in the gardens, during his meals and walks. He discovers that it is indeed possible to remain centered and peaceful, even while engaged in activity and interaction with others. He also begins to practice the art of conscious speech, speaking only when he has something genuinely useful to contribute, and speaking from a place of inner clarity rather than emotional reactivity. He is amazed to discover how much of his usual conversation is simply mental noise, words spoken out of habit or nervousness, rather than from any real need to communicate. When he eliminates this unnecessary chatter, his remaining words become more precise, more meaningful, and more effective. On the final day of his retreat, Venerable Thik invites King Devendra to join him for one last teaching session in the meditation garden. As they sit together in the peaceful pavilion, surrounded by the beauty and tranquility that has become so familiar and precious to the king, the monk shares his final words of guidance. "Your Majesty," he says, "you came here 3 weeks ago as a man who was drowning in his own success, overwhelmed by the very achievements that should have brought you happiness. You are leaving as a man who has discovered the source of true contentment within himself. But I want to remind you that this transformation is not a destination, but a beginning. The real test of what you have learned will come when you return to your kingdom and face the challenges of integrating this wisdom into your daily life as a ruler." The king listens with deep gratitude and attention, knowing that these may be the last words of direct guidance he receives from this remarkable teacher. The monk continues, "There will be times when you forget what you have learned here, when you get caught up in the old patterns of reactivity and compulsion. This is natural and expected. The important thing is not to judge yourself harshly when this happens, but simply to notice what has occurred and gently return to your practice of inner stillness. Each time, you remember to pause, to breathe, to reconnect with your inner peace. You strengthen your capacity to remain centered, even in challenging circumstances. I also want to remind you," the monk adds, "that the peace you have discovered is not just for your own benefit. As a king, you have the opportunity to share this gift with your entire kingdom. When you rule from a place of inner wisdom and tranquility, you create an atmosphere of stability and calm that affects everyone around you. Your subjects will sense that their king is no longer driven by anxiety and compulsion, but is grounded in something deeper and more reliable. This will give them confidence and security that no amount of wealth or military power could provide." King Devendra feels the profound truth of these words resonating in his heart. He realizes that his personal transformation has implications that extend far beyond his own happiness and well-being. As a leader, he has the responsibility and the opportunity to model a different way of being in the world, to demonstrate that it is possible to be effective and successful without sacrificing inner peace and wisdom. "Master," he says, his voice filled with deep emotion and gratitude, "I cannot adequately express what these 3 weeks have meant to me. You have given me something more valuable than all the treasures in my kingdom. You have given me back my own true self. I came here as a man who had everything but was profoundly unhappy. I am leaving as a man who understands that happiness cannot be found in external circumstances, but only in the depths of one's own being." Venerable Tich, and smiles with the joy of a teacher who has successfully transmitted the most precious gift he possesses. "Your Majesty," he says, "what I have given you was already yours. I have simply helped you to remove the obstacles that were preventing you from experiencing your own inherent peace and wisdom. The real credit belongs to you for having the courage to undertake this journey and the persistence to see it through to completion." As the king prepares to leave the monastery and return to his kingdom, he feels a mixture of excitement and trepidation. He is eager to begin implementing what he has learned, to discover how his new understanding will transform his approach to leadership and governance. But he is also aware that he is leaving a protected environment where the conditions were ideal for inner development, and returning to a world that may not always support or understand his new way of being. Venerable Thich seems to sense these mixed feelings. "Remember," he says, as they walk together toward the monastery gates where the king's retinue is waiting to escort him home, "you are not leaving the peace behind when you leave this place. The peace goes with you because it is not separate from who you are. The monastery has simply been a mirror that helped you to see what was always present within you. Now you have the opportunity to discover that every place can be a monastery, every moment can be a meditation, every interaction can be an opportunity to practice wisdom and compassion." As King Devendra mounts his elephant and begins the journey back to his kingdom, he carries with him not just the memory of his transformative experience, but a living understanding that will continue to deepen and mature throughout the rest of his life. The 3 weeks of silence have taught him that true power comes not from the ability to control external circumstances, but from the capacity to remain centered and peaceful, regardless of what is happening around him. The journey back to the capital takes several days, and the king uses this time to continue his practice of inner stillness even while traveling. He notices how different this journey feels from his frantic trip to the monastery 3 weeks earlier. Then, he had been driven by desperation and anxiety, his mind racing ahead to imagine what the monk might be able to do for him. Now, he travels with a sense of calm presence, fully aware of the landscape through which he is passing, the rhythm of his elephant's movement, the changing quality of light as the sun moves across the sky. When he arrives at his palace, King Devendra is struck by how different everything looks and feels. The same buildings, the same courtyards, the same decorations that had once seemed so important now appear almost dreamlike in their elaborate complexity. The noise and activity that had once felt normal and necessary now seem overwhelming and chaotic. But instead of being disturbed by this contrast, the king feels a deep compassion for the world he is re-entering, understanding that all of this frantic activity arises from the same restlessness and seeking that had once driven his own behavior. His advisors and courtiers are amazed by the transformation they see in their king. The man who had left the palace 3 weeks earlier had been tense, anxious, and constantly agitated. The man who returns is calm, centered, and radiating a quality of peaceful authority that they have never seen before. When he speaks, his words are fewer but more precise and effective. When he listens, his attention is complete and undivided. When he makes decisions, they arise from a place of clear wisdom rather than reactive emotion. Over the months and years that follow, King Devendra gradually transforms not just his own approach to leadership, but the entire culture of his kingdom. He establishes daily periods of silence in the palace, times when no meetings are scheduled and no urgent business is conducted, allowing space for reflection and deeper consideration of important matters. He institutes a practice of beginning all council meetings with a few minutes of quiet contemplation, helping his advisors to center themselves before engaging in discussion and decision-making. Most importantly, he models a different way of being in the world, a way that demonstrates that it is possible to be highly effective and successful while maintaining inner peace and wisdom. His subjects notice that their king no longer seems driven by anxiety or compulsion, but appears to be guided by a deeper intelligence that takes into account not just immediate concerns, but the long-term well-being of the entire kingdom. The kingdom prospers under this new style of leadership. Conflicts that once seemed intractable are resolved through patient dialogue and creative problem-solving. Economic policies are developed with careful consideration of their effects on all levels of society. Relationships with neighboring kingdoms improve, as King Devendra's reputation for wisdom and fairness spreads throughout the region. But perhaps most importantly, the king's personal transformation inspires others to undertake their own journeys of inner development. Many of his subjects, seeing the profound change in their ruler, begin to seek out their own teachers and practices. The monastery where Venerable Thich An lives becomes a place of pilgrimage, not just for those seeking healing from mental and emotional distress, but for anyone who wishes to discover the peace and wisdom that lie at the heart of human existence. Years later, when King Devendra is an old man, he often reflects on those 3 weeks that changed the course of his entire life. He realizes that the greatest gift Venerable Thich An gave him was not any particular technique or practice, but the understanding that true happiness and fulfillment cannot be found in external circumstances, no matter how favorable they may be. The peace he discovered in the silence of the monastery was not something foreign or exotic, but the most natural and fundamental aspect of his own being. As you listen to this story tonight, dear friend, allow yourself to recognize the same truth in your own life. Like King Devendra, you may have been searching for peace and happiness in all the wrong places, in achievements, in possessions, in the approval of others, in the constant activity and stimulation that our modern world provides. But the peace you seek is not somewhere else, waiting to be found or earned or achieved. It is here, now, in this very moment, in the depths of your own being. The practice of silence that transformed the king's life is available to you as well. You don't need to retreat to a monastery for 3 weeks, though such an experience can certainly be valuable. You can begin right now, in this moment, by simply allowing yourself to rest in the natural silence that is always present beneath the surface activity of your mind. You can learn to pause before reacting, to listen more deeply, to speak less but with greater wisdom and compassion. As you drift now into the deepest and most restorative sleep, let the story of King Devendra's transformation be a gentle reminder of your own potential for inner peace and wisdom. Let the silence that surrounds you now be not an absence, but a presence, the presence of your own true nature, which is inherently peaceful, inherently wise, inherently whole. You don't need to create this peace or earn it or achieve it. You need only to recognize it, to rest in it, to allow it to be the foundation of your life. Rest now in the profound silence that is your birthright. Rest in the understanding that beneath all the noise and activity of daily life, there is a place of perfect stillness that can never be disturbed. Rest in the knowledge that you, like King Devendra, have the capacity to transform not only your own life, but the lives of everyone around you, simply by learning to abide in the peace that is your deepest nature. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of silence. If this story has brought you comfort and insight, we invite you to share it with others who may be seeking the same peace that you have found tonight. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of transformation and wisdom, and remember that each time you choose silence over noise, peace over agitation, presence over distraction, you are contributing to the healing of our world. Sleep now, dear friend. Sleep deeply and peacefully, knowing that you are held in the same eternal silence that transformed a restless king into a wise and compassionate ruler. May your dreams be filled with the light of understanding, and may you wake tomorrow with a deeper appreciation for the profound power of sacred silence. Good night, and may you rest in perfect peace. But let us return now to that pivotal moment in King Devendra's journey to explore more deeply the profound transformation that took place during those sacred 21 days. For there is much more to this story than we have yet discovered, layers of wisdom and understanding that reveal themselves only when we slow down enough to truly listen, to truly see, to truly feel the depth of what occurred in that ancient monastery. On the morning of the 4th day of his retreat, King Devendra experienced something that would forever change his understanding of what it means to be truly awake. He had risen before dawn, as had become his custom, and made his way to the meditation hall, where the monks gathered each morning for their silent sitting practice. The hall was dimly lit by oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on the ancient stone walls, creating an atmosphere of timeless mystery and reverence. As he settled into his meditation posture, the king noticed that his mind was unusually quiet. The constant stream of thoughts that had plagued him during his first few days of practice had slowed to a gentle trickle, like a river that has found its natural pace after the spring floods have subsided. His breathing had become so soft and natural that he could barely feel it, and his body felt simultaneously completely relaxed and perfectly alert, like a cat resting in the sun but ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. As the minutes passed in silence, something extraordinary began to happen. The boundaries between his individual consciousness and the larger awareness that seemed to permeate the meditation hall began to dissolve. He could feel the presence of the dozens of other monks sitting in meditation around him, not as separate individuals, but as expressions of the same fundamental consciousness that he was discovering within himself. It was as if they were all drops of water that had suddenly realized they were part of the same vast ocean. The experience deepened as the meditation continued. The king began to sense that his awareness was expanding beyond the walls of the meditation hall, beyond the boundaries of the monastery, beyond the forest that surrounded it. He could feel the presence of all living beings, the birds beginning to sing in the trees, the small animals stirring in their burrows, the plants and flowers opening to receive the first light of dawn. All of existence seemed to be breathing together in perfect harmony, participating in the same cosmic rhythm that he could now feel pulsing through his own heart. When the meditation bell finally rang to signal the end of the sitting period, King Devendra remained motionless for several minutes, reluctant to leave this state of expanded awareness. When he finally opened his eyes, the world looked completely different. The same meditation hall, the same monks, the same oil lamps and stone walls were all present, but they seemed to be glowing with an inner light, as if he was seeing them for the first time with completely clear vision. As he walked slowly back to his room, the king felt as if he was moving through a dream. Every step seemed to be taken in perfect timing, with some cosmic rhythm. Every breath seemed to connect him more deeply with the life force that animated all of existence. Every sight, sound, and sensation seemed to be a direct communication from the divine intelligence that he could now sense underlying all of reality. This experience marked a turning point in the king's retreat. From that morning forward, his practice took on a completely different quality. Instead of struggling with his restless mind, he found himself naturally settling into deeper and deeper states of peace and clarity. Instead of feeling like an outsider trying to learn the ways of the monastery, he began to feel like he was coming home to his true nature. Venerable Teach An, who had been observing the king's progress with the careful attention of a master gardener watching a rare flower bloom, recognized the significance of this breakthrough. That afternoon, he invited the king to join him for a special teaching session in a part of the monastery that few visitors ever saw, the ancient library, where the most sacred texts were kept. The library was a marvel of architectural beauty and spiritual atmosphere. The walls were lined with hand-carved wooden shelves that held thousands of manuscripts, some so old that they seemed to glow with the accumulated wisdom of centuries. Shafts of golden light filtered through high windows, illuminating particles of dust that danced in the air like tiny spirits. The scent of sandalwood and aged paper created an atmosphere of profound reverence and learning. As they settled into comfortable chairs, surrounded by these ancient treasures of wisdom, Venerable Teach An began to share teachings that went far deeper than anything he had offered before. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying the weight of profound understanding, "what you experienced this morning in meditation is what we call a glimpse of your true nature. You have tasted, for the first time, what it means to be fully awake, fully present, fully alive. This experience is not something unusual or supernatural. It is the most natural thing in the world. It is simply what happens when the mind stops creating artificial barriers between itself and the rest of existence." The king listened with rapt attention, his entire being focused on receiving these precious teachings. The monk continued, "Most people live their entire lives without ever experiencing this natural state of consciousness. They are so caught up in the constant chatter of their thoughts, so identified with their worries and desires and fears, that they never discover the vast, peaceful awareness that is their birthright. They are like people who spend their whole lives looking at the surface of a lake, never realizing that beneath the waves lies an ocean of infinite depth and tranquility. But you, Your Majesty, have been blessed with a direct experience of this deeper reality. You have felt what it is like to be connected to the source of all peace, all wisdom, all love. This experience will serve as a reference point for the rest of your life. No matter how challenging your circumstances become, no matter how much noise and chaos surrounds you, you will always be able to remember this taste of your true nature and find your way back to it." The king felt a deep sense of gratitude and wonder as he absorbed these words. The experience of that morning had indeed felt like a homecoming, like a return to something he had always known, but had somehow forgotten. "Master," he said, "how can I ensure that I don't lose touch with this understanding when I return to my kingdom? How can I maintain this connection to my true nature in the midst of all the demands and distractions of royal life?" Venerable Teach An smiled with the compassion of someone who had faced and resolved this exact challenge many times in his own spiritual journey. "The key," he said, "is to understand that this deeper awareness is not something that comes and goes depending on external circumstances. It is the very foundation of your being, the unchanging background against which all the changing experiences of life take place. Once you have recognized it, you can learn to rest in it, regardless of what is happening on the surface of your mind or in your external environment." The monk rose from his chair and walked to one of the ancient shelves, selecting a small, leather-bound volume that looked as if it had been handled by countless seekers over the centuries. He opened it to a page marked with a silk ribbon and began to read in a voice that seemed to make the ancient words come alive in the present moment. "Listen to these words from one of our greatest masters," he said. "The wise person is like the sky, vast, open, unchanging. unaffected by the clouds that pass through it. The foolish person is like the clouds themselves, constantly changing, constantly moving, constantly creating drama and disturbance. But even the clouds are held by the sky, supported by the sky, given space to exist by the sky. When you learn to identify with the sky of your own awareness, rather than the clouds of your thoughts and emotions, you discover a peace that cannot be disturbed by any external circumstance. These words resonated in the king's consciousness like a bell struck in a vast cathedral. He could feel their truth not just intellectually, but in the very cells of his body, in the depths of his heart, in the core of his being. He realized that the experience he had that morning was indeed a recognition of the sky-like nature of his own awareness, vast, open, peaceful, and completely unaffected by the temporary phenomena that moved through it. Over the remaining days of his retreat, King Devendra dedicated himself to deepening this understanding through both formal meditation practice and the integration of mindful awareness into every aspect of his daily life. He learned to maintain the sky-like quality of consciousness while eating, while working in the gardens, while walking through the forest, while engaging in conversation with the monks. One particularly profound teaching came during his work in the monastery's herb garden, where he was assigned to help with the delicate task of harvesting medicinal plants. The monk who supervised this work, an elderly master named Venerable Bodhi, had spent 40 years studying the healing properties of plants and had developed an almost mystical understanding of the relationship between human consciousness and the natural world. As they worked together among the rows of carefully tended herbs, Venerable Bodhi shared wisdom that would prove invaluable to the king's future role as a leader. "Your Majesty," he said, his weathered hands moving with practiced precision as he selected the perfect leaves and flowers. "Observe how each plant grows according to its own nature, in its own time, without forcing or striving. The mint does not try to become a rose, nor does the rose try to become a tree. Each plant simply expresses its essential nature fully and completely, and in doing so, it contributes to the health and beauty of the entire garden." The king paused in his own harvesting to consider this teaching. "Are you suggesting, Master, that leadership should be like gardening? That a king should simply allow his subjects to grow according to their own nature, rather than trying to control and direct their every action?" Venerable Bodhi smiled, his eyes crinkling with the joy of a teacher who has found a particularly receptive student. "Exactly, Your Majesty. The wise gardener does not force the plants to grow, but simply creates the conditions in which they can flourish according to their own nature. He provides good soil, adequate water, protection from harmful pests, and then trusts in the inherent wisdom of life itself to produce the harvest. In the same way, the wise ruler creates conditions of justice, peace, and opportunity, and then trusts in the inherent goodness and wisdom of his people to create a flourishing society." This teaching revolutionized the king's understanding of leadership and governance. He began to see that much of his previous anxiety and stress as a ruler had come from his belief that he needed to control and manage every aspect of his kingdom's functioning. He had been like a gardener who constantly digs up his plants to check on their roots, inadvertently damaging them in his eagerness to help them grow. But how does one know when to intervene and when to simply trust in the natural process? The king asked, genuinely curious about how to apply this wisdom in practical situations. "This is where the practice of inner silence becomes essential," Venerable Bodhi replied. "When your mind is quiet and your heart is open, you develop what we call discriminating wisdom, the ability to sense what is needed in any given situation. Sometimes action is required, sometimes patience is needed, sometimes you must speak firmly, sometimes you must listen deeply. Sometimes you must make difficult decisions. Sometimes you must allow others to find their own way. The key is to respond from a place of inner stillness rather than reactive emotion. As the days of his retreat drew to a close, King Devendra found himself experiencing a bittersweet mixture of gratitude and reluctance. He was profoundly grateful for the transformation he had undergone, for the peace he had discovered, for the wisdom he had received, but he was also reluctant to leave this sanctuary of silence and return to the complex demands of royal life. Sensing his students' mixed feelings, Venerable Thich invited the king to join him for one final teaching session on the evening before his departure. They met in the monk's private garden as the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. The air was filled with the fragrance of night-blooming jasmine, and the sound of evening prayers drifted softly from the meditation hall. "Your Majesty," the monk began, "I can sense that you are feeling some anxiety about leaving this place and returning to your kingdom. This is natural and understandable. You have tasted a quality of peace and clarity that feels precious and fragile, and you are worried about losing it in the chaos of worldly responsibilities. But I want to share with you one final teaching that I hope will give you confidence as you make this transition." The king settled into a comfortable position on the stone bench where they sat, giving his full attention to these final words of guidance. The monk continued, "The peace you have discovered here is not dependent on external circumstances. It is not something that exists only in monasteries or meditation halls. It is the very essence of who you are, and it goes with you wherever you go. The monastery has simply provided ideal conditions for you to recognize what was always present within you." "Think of it this way," Venerable Thich said, gesturing toward the garden around them. "These flowers are beautiful and fragrant, but their beauty does not depend on this particular garden. If we were to transplant them to another location, they would still be beautiful and fragrant, as long as they remained rooted in good soil and received adequate care. In the same way, the peace and wisdom you have cultivated here will flourish wherever you go, as long as you remain rooted in your daily practice and continue to nourish your inner life." The monk paused, allowing the metaphor to sink in before continuing with what would prove to be his most important teaching. "But there is something even more significant that I want you to understand. The transformation you have undergone is not just for your own benefit. As a king, you have the opportunity and the responsibility to share this gift with your entire kingdom. When you rule from a place of inner peace and wisdom, you create a field of positive influence that affects everyone around you in ways that you may never fully comprehend. Your subjects will sense that their king is no longer driven by anxiety, fear, or the compulsive need to control everything. They will feel the stability and calm that radiates from your presence, and this will give them confidence and security that no amount of wealth or military power could provide. Your advisors will find that they can think more clearly and make better decisions when they are in your presence, because your inner stillness will help to quiet their own mental agitation." The king felt a profound sense of responsibility and opportunity as he absorbed these words. He realized that his personal transformation had implications that extended far beyond his own happiness and well-being. As a leader, he had the chance to model a different way of being in the world, to demonstrate that it was possible to be effective and successful without sacrificing inner peace and wisdom. "Master," he said, his voice filled with deep emotion and commitment, "I understand now that this retreat has not been an escape from my responsibilities as a king, but a preparation for fulfilling those responsibilities at a much deeper level. I see that true leadership is not about imposing my will on others, but about creating conditions in which everyone can flourish according to their highest potential." Venerable Thich nodded with satisfaction, recognizing that his student had grasped the most essential teaching. "Yes, Your Majesty, and remember that this understanding will continue to deepen and mature throughout your life. What you have learned here is not a finished achievement, but the beginning of a lifelong journey of growth and service. There will be times when you forget these teachings, when you get caught up in old patterns of reactivity and stress. This is natural and expected. The important thing is to be gentle with yourself when this happens, and to simply return to your practice of inner stillness whenever you remember." As the evening deepened and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the two men sat together in comfortable silence, both of them aware that they were sharing a moment of profound significance. The king felt a deep sense of completion, as if a long journey had reached its destination. But he also felt the excitement of a new beginning, the anticipation of discovering how his transformed understanding would express itself in the practical challenges of leadership and governance. The next morning, as King Devendra prepared to leave the monastery, he was surprised to discover that his feelings of reluctance had been replaced by a sense of eager anticipation. He was ready to return to his kingdom, not as the anxious, overwhelmed ruler who had arrived 3 weeks earlier, but as a man who had discovered an unshakable source of peace and wisdom within himself. The entire monastic community gathered to bid him farewell, their faces radiating the same peaceful joy that had first attracted him to this place. As he mounted his elephant and began the journey home, the king carried with him not just the memory of his transformative experience, but a living understanding that would continue to guide and inspire him for the rest of his life. The return journey to his capital city provided King Devendra with his first opportunity to test his new understanding in a more challenging environment. Unlike the protected atmosphere of the monastery, the road was filled with the usual distractions and demands of travel, the noise of his retinue, the discomfort of long hours on elephant back, the need to make decisions about routes and rest stops, the constant stream of reports from messengers who caught up with the royal party along the way. But instead of being overwhelmed by these challenges, the king found that he could maintain his inner stillness, even in the midst of activity and decision-making. He discovered that the peace he had cultivated was indeed like the sky, vast enough to hold all the clouds of temporary experience without being disturbed by them. When messengers brought news of problems in the kingdom, he could listen with complete attention and respond with clear wisdom, without losing his fundamental equanimity. One particularly significant test came on the second day of travel, when a messenger arrived with urgent news of a border dispute that threatened to escalate into armed conflict. In the past, such news would have sent the king into a frenzy of anxiety and reactive planning. He would have immediately begun issuing orders, demanding more information, and working himself into a state of high agitation that would have made clear thinking impossible. But now, drawing on the teachings he had received from Venerable Thich An, the king paused before responding. He took several deep breaths, reconnected with his inner stillness, and then asked the messenger to provide a complete and detailed account of the situation. As he listened, he found that his mind remained calm and clear, able to process the information without being overwhelmed by emotional reactivity. When the messenger finished his report, the king remained silent for several minutes, not out of indecision or confusion, but to allow his deeper wisdom to reveal the most appropriate response. Finally, he spoke with a clarity and authority that surprised even his most trusted advisors. "Send word to both parties in this dispute," he said, his voice carrying the calm confidence of someone who speaks from inner certainty rather than external pressure. "Tell them that I will personally mediate this conflict when I return to the capital in 3 days' time. In the meantime, both sides are to withdraw their forces to a safe distance and refrain from any provocative actions." Assure them that I am committed to finding a solution that honors the legitimate interests of all parties involved." His advisors were amazed by this response. In the past, the king's approach to such crises had been to react immediately with either aggressive military action or anxious diplomatic maneuvering. But this response demonstrated a completely different quality of leadership: patient, wise, and confident in the possibility of finding creative solutions to seemingly intractable problems. As the royal party continued its journey toward the capital, word of the king's transformed presence began to spread among his retinue. Servants and soldiers who had known him for years noticed that he seemed like a different person, calmer, more present, more genuinely interested in their welfare and concerns. When he spoke to them, his attention was complete and undivided. When he made decisions, they arose from careful consideration rather than impulsive reaction. By the time they reached the outskirts of the capital city, King Devendra had become completely confident in his ability to maintain his inner peace, while fully engaging with the demands of leadership. He realized that the monastery had not been an escape from the world, but a training ground for a more effective and compassionate way of engaging with the world. The king's return to his palace created a sensation among the court officials, advisors, and servants who had known him before his retreat. The transformation was so dramatic that some initially wondered if this was really the same person who had left 3 weeks earlier in such a state of agitation and distress. The man who had returned radiated a quality of peaceful authority that commanded respect and inspired confidence in everyone around him. His first official act upon returning was to address the border dispute that had arisen during his absence. Instead of immediately summoning his military advisors and preparing for potential conflict, he arranged for a series of private meetings with representatives from both sides of the dispute. These meetings were conducted in a completely different atmosphere from the usual tense negotiations that characterize such diplomatic encounters. The king began each meeting by creating a space of calm and respectful dialogue. He listened to each party's concerns with complete attention, asking clarifying questions that demonstrated his genuine desire to understand their perspective. He spoke slowly and thoughtfully, choosing his words with care and precision. Most importantly, he maintained an attitude of patient confidence that a mutually satisfactory solution could be found, even when the positions of the two sides seemed completely incompatible. After 3 days of careful dialogue and creative problem-solving, a resolution was reached that satisfied both parties and actually strengthened the kingdom's relationships with its neighbors. The solution was so elegant and fair that other rulers in the region began to seek out King Devendra's mediation for their own disputes, recognizing that he possessed a rare gift for finding peaceful solutions to complex problems. Word of the king's transformation and his new approach to leadership spread throughout the kingdom and beyond. Subjects who had previously felt anxious and uncertain about their ruler's erratic behavior now felt confident and secure under his wise and stable guidance. Neighboring kingdoms that had once viewed his realm with suspicion or hostility began to see it as a model of enlightened governance. But perhaps the most significant change was in the daily culture of the palace itself. King Devendra instituted a number of practices that reflected his new understanding of leadership and created an atmosphere of calm wisdom throughout the royal court. Each day began with a period of silent reflection, during which all court business was suspended and everyone was invited to center themselves in preparation for the day's activities. Council meetings were transformed from chaotic debates into thoughtful discussions characterized by careful listening and respectful dialogue. The king established a practice of beginning each meeting with a few minutes of silence, allowing all participants to quiet their minds and connect with their deeper wisdom before engaging in decision-making. He also instituted regular breaks during long meetings, recognizing that the quality of thinking and decision-making deteriorated when people became mentally fatigued. Most importantly, the king modeled a completely different style of communication and interaction. He spoke less frequently than before, but when he did speak, his words carried greater weight and authority because they arose from genuine reflection rather than reactive emotion. He listened more deeply to his advisors and subjects, creating space for new ideas and perspectives to emerge. He made decisions more slowly and deliberately, taking time to consider all aspects of complex issues rather than rushing to judgment. The results of these changes were remarkable. The kingdom's economy flourished as trade relationships improved and internal conflicts decreased. The quality of governance improved dramatically as decisions were made with greater wisdom and foresight. The general happiness and well-being of the population increased as people felt more secure and confident in their leadership. But King Devendra never forgot that his transformation was not a personal achievement to be proud of, but a gift to be shared and a responsibility to be honored. He remained committed to his daily practice of meditation and inner reflection, understanding that maintaining his connection to the source of wisdom and peace was essential not just for his own well-being, but for the welfare of his entire kingdom. Years passed, and the king's reputation for wisdom and compassionate leadership spread far beyond the borders of his own realm. Rulers from distant kingdoms came to seek his counsel on matters of governance and diplomacy. Scholars and philosophers traveled great distances to study his methods and learn from his example. The monastery where he had undergone his transformation became a place of pilgrimage for leaders and seekers from all walks of life. Through all of these developments, King Devendra remained humble and grateful, never forgetting the profound debt he owed to Venerable Tish An and the community of monks who had shown him the path to inner peace. He maintained regular correspondence with his teacher, sharing the challenges and successes of implementing contemplative principles in the complex world of political leadership. In one particularly meaningful letter, written on the 10th anniversary of his retreat, the king reflected on the long-term impact of his transformation. Venerable Master, as I look back on these 10 years since my time at your monastery, I am amazed by how profoundly those 3 weeks of silence changed not just my own life, but the lives of countless others. The peace I discovered within myself has rippled outward in ways I could never have imagined, affecting my family, my court, my subjects, and even the relationships between kingdoms. I have come to understand that the practice of inner silence is not a luxury or an indulgence, but one of the most practical and effective tools available to anyone in a position of leadership or influence. When we learn to respond from a place of inner stillness rather than reactive emotion, we make better decisions, communicate more effectively, and create an atmosphere of stability and trust that benefits everyone around us. Most importantly, I have learned that true power comes not from the ability to control external circumstances, but from the capacity to remain centered and peaceful, regardless of what is happening around us. This understanding has freed me from the anxiety and stress that once plagued my days and nights, and has allowed me to serve my people with a joy and effectiveness that I never thought possible. Venerable Tichan's response to this letter was characteristically brief, but profound. Your Majesty, what you have discovered is the secret that all the great leaders throughout history have known, whether they called it by this name or not. When we learn to lead from the depths of our being, rather than the surface of our personality, we tap into a source of wisdom and compassion that is inexhaustible. Your example is a gift not just to your own kingdom, but to all future generations who will learn from your story that it is possible to be both effective and peaceful, both successful and wise. As King Devendra entered the later years of his reign, he began to focus increasingly on ensuring that the wisdom he had gained would not die with him. He established schools throughout his kingdom where the principles of contemplative leadership were taught alongside traditional subjects. He created a council of advisors who were trained not just in the technical aspects of governance, but in the inner practices that support wise decision-making. Most importantly, he began to prepare his eldest son, Prince Arjuna, to inherit not just the throne, but the understanding that true kingship is fundamentally about service rather than power, about creating conditions for others to flourish rather than simply commanding obedience. The prince's education included not just the usual training in military strategy, diplomacy, and statecraft, but also regular periods of retreat and contemplation. Like his father before him, Prince Arjuna spent time at the monastery with Venerable kōans, learning to cultivate the inner stillness and wisdom that would be essential for effective leadership. When the time came for King Devendra to pass the throne to his son, the transition was marked not by the usual anxiety and power struggles that characterize such moments, but by a sense of confident continuity. The kingdom's subjects trusted that their new ruler had been prepared not just to maintain the peace and prosperity they had enjoyed, but to continue the evolution toward ever greater wisdom and compassion in governance. In his final years, King Devendra often returned to the monastery, where his transformation had begun, not as a desperate seeker looking for solutions to his problems, but as a grateful student continuing to deepen his understanding of the principles that had guided his life. He would sit for hours in the same meditation hall where he had first discovered the peace that changed everything, marveling at the journey that had brought him from anxiety and restlessness to profound contentment and wisdom. During one of these visits, now as an elderly man whose hair had turned white and whose face bore the lines of a life well lived, he shared a reflection with Venerable Tish, and that captured the essence of what he had learned. "Master, when I first came to you all those years ago, I thought I was seeking a technique or a practice that would solve my problems and make my life easier. I had no idea that what you were offering was not a solution to my problems, but a completely different way of understanding what life is about. I learned that the peace I was seeking was not the absence of challenges or difficulties, but the presence of an unshakable inner stability that could remain calm and clear regardless of external circumstances. I discovered that true happiness comes not from getting what we want, but from wanting what we have, from finding contentment in the present moment, rather than constantly seeking fulfillment in some imagined future. Most importantly, I came to understand that the greatest gift we can give to others is not our knowledge, or our wealth, or our power, but our presence, the quality of peaceful awareness that emerges when we are fully here, fully awake, fully alive to the miracle of this moment." Venerable kōans, now also advanced in years but still radiating the same timeless wisdom that had first attracted the king, smiled with deep satisfaction. "Your Majesty," he said, "you have become what every teacher hopes their student will become, not a follower or an imitator, but someone who has discovered their own authentic wisdom and learned to express it in service to others. Your life has been a teaching in itself, a demonstration that it is possible to live with both effectiveness and peace, both success and wisdom." As the sun set on that final conversation between teacher and student, both men sat together in the comfortable silence that had been the foundation of their relationship from the very beginning. They understood that the most profound teachings are often transmitted not through words, but through the quality of presence that emerges when two beings meet in the depths of their shared humanity. And so, dear friend, as this story draws to its close, we return to the fundamental truth that inspired King Devendra's transformation and that remains available to each of us in every moment of our lives. The peace we seek, the wisdom we long for, the love we crave, all of these are not distant goals to be achieved through struggle and effort, but present realities to be recognized and embraced through the simple practice of inner stillness. Like the king in our story, you may have been searching for happiness and fulfillment in all the wrong places, in achievements and possessions, in the approval of others, in the constant stimulation and distraction that our modern world provides. But the peace you seek is not somewhere else, waiting to be found or earned or achieved. It is here, now, in this very moment, in the depths of your own being. The practice of silence that transformed the king's life is available to you as well. You don't need to retreat to a monastery for 3 weeks, though such an experience can certainly be valuable. You can begin right now, in this moment, by simply allowing yourself to rest in the natural silence that is always present beneath the surface activity of your mind. You can learn to pause before reacting, to listen more deeply, to speak less, but with greater wisdom and compassion. You can discover that true power comes not from the ability to control external circumstances, but from the capacity to remain centered and peaceful, regardless of what is happening around you. You can find that the greatest gift you can give to others is not your knowledge or your wealth or your achievements, but your presence, the quality of peaceful awareness that emerges when you are fully here, fully awake, fully alive. As you drift now into the deepest and most restorative sleep, let the story of King Devendra's transformation be a gentle reminder of your own potential for inner peace and wisdom. Let the silence that surrounds you now be not an absence, but a presence, the presence of your own true nature, which is inherently peaceful, inherently wise, inherently whole. Rest now in the profound silence that is your birthright. Rest in the understanding that beneath all the noise and activity of daily life, there is a place of perfect stillness that can never be disturbed. Rest in the knowledge that you, like King Devendra, have the capacity to transform not only your own life, but the lives of everyone around you, simply by learning to abide in the peace that is your deepest nature. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of silence. If this story has brought you comfort and insight, we invite you to share it with others who may be seeking the same peace that you have found tonight. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of transformation and wisdom, and remember that each time you choose silence over noise, peace over agitation, presence over distraction, you are contributing to the healing of our world. Sleep now, dear friend. Sleep deeply and peacefully, knowing that you are held in the same eternal silence that transformed a restless king into a wise and compassionate ruler. May your dreams be filled with the light of understanding, and may you wake tomorrow with a deeper appreciation for the profound power of sacred silence. Good night, and may you rest in perfect peace. But there is still more to this profound story that we must explore together, deeper layers of wisdom and transformation that reveal themselves only when we have the patience to listen with our whole being. For the tale of King Devendra's journey into silence is not just the story of one man's awakening, but a mirror in which we can see our own potential for transformation, our own capacity to discover the peace that lies hidden beneath the surface turbulence of our daily lives. Let us return now to a particularly significant moment in the king's retreat, one that we have not yet fully explored, the morning of the 7th day, when he experienced what would become known throughout the monastery as the Great Silence. This was a moment of such profound stillness and clarity that it would serve as a reference point for the rest of his spiritual journey, a touchstone of peace to which he could always return in times of difficulty or confusion. The king had awakened that morning even before the meditation bell, drawn from sleep by a quality of silence so deep and complete that it seemed to have substance, like a gentle presence that filled his small room and extended far beyond its walls. As he lay in his narrow bed, he became aware that something extraordinary was happening in his consciousness. The usual stream of thoughts that typically began flowing, the moment he opened his eyes, was completely absent. Instead, there was a vast, luminous emptiness that felt not vacant or hollow, but infinitely full of potential and peace. He rose slowly and made his way to the meditation hall, moving with a quality of grace and presence that he had never experienced before. Each step seemed to be taken in perfect harmony with some cosmic rhythm. Each breath seemed to connect him more deeply with the life force that animated all of existence. When he entered the hall and took his usual place among the other meditators, he felt as if he was dissolving into the collective silence, becoming one with the shared consciousness of all the monks who sat in perfect stillness around him. As the formal meditation period began, King Devendra found himself entering a state of awareness that transcended anything he had previously imagined possible. His individual sense of self seemed to expand beyond the boundaries of his physical body, beyond the walls of the meditation hall, beyond the forest that surrounded the monastery. He felt as if his consciousness was merging with the consciousness of all living beings, as if he was experiencing life from the perspective of the trees, the birds, the flowing streams, the very earth itself. In this expanded state of awareness, he began to understand truths that no amount of intellectual study could have revealed. He saw with perfect clarity how all of existence was interconnected, how every thought, word, and action rippled outward to affect the entire web of life. He understood that the separation between self and other, between ruler and subject, between human and nature, was an illusion created by the limited perspective of ordinary consciousness. Most importantly, he experienced directly the source of all peace, all wisdom, all love, a luminous presence that seemed to be the very essence of existence itself. This presence was not separate from him or distant from him. It was the deepest truth of his own being, the unchanging awareness in which all the changing experiences of life took place. He realized that this presence had always been with him, but had been obscured by the constant activity of his thinking mind, like the sun hidden behind clouds. When the meditation bell finally rang to signal the end of the sitting period, King Devendra remained motionless for a long time, reluctant to leave this state of profound unity and understanding. When he finally opened his eyes, the world looked completely transformed. The same meditation hall, the same monks, the same oil lamps and stone walls were all present, but they seemed to be glowing with an inner light, as if he was seeing them for the first time with completely clear vision. As he walked slowly back to his room, the king felt as if he was moving through a living mandala of sacred geometry. Every sight, sound, and sensation seemed to be a perfect expression of the divine intelligence that he could now sense underlying all of reality. The morning light filtering through the trees created patterns of shadow and illumination that seemed to be a visual representation of the interplay between form and emptiness that he had experienced in meditation. The sound of birds singing seemed to be a celestial chorus, celebrating the eternal dance of consciousness and creation. This experience marked a fundamental turning point in the king's understanding of himself and his role in the world. He realized that his previous approach to leadership had been based on the illusion of separation, the belief that he was somehow separate from his subjects, that his well-being was independent of theirs, that his power came from his ability to control and manipulate external circumstances. But now he understood that true leadership was based on the recognition of fundamental interconnectedness, the understanding that the welfare of the ruler and the welfare of the people were inseparable, that the peace of the individual and the peace of the kingdom were two aspects of the same reality, that genuine power came not from the ability to dominate others, but from the capacity to serve the highest good of all. Later that morning, when Venerable kōans came to check on his progress, the monk immediately recognized the profound shift that had taken place in the king's consciousness. Without saying a word, he could see in the king's eyes, in his posture, in the quality of his presence, that a fundamental transformation had occurred. The restless, anxious man who had arrived at the monastery a week earlier had been replaced by someone who radiated the deep peace and wisdom of one who has touched the source of all existence. "Your Majesty," the monk said with a smile of profound joy and satisfaction, "I can see that you have received a great gift this morning. You have been blessed with a direct experience of your true nature, a glimpse of the reality that lies beyond the veil of ordinary perception. This experience will serve as a beacon for the rest of your life, a reminder of who you really are beneath all the roles and identities that you wear in the world." The king nodded, his eyes shining with the light of deep understanding. "Master," he said, his voice carrying a quality of certainty and peace that had not been there before, "I feel as if I have been living in a dream my entire life, and this morning I finally woke up. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about leadership, about the nature of reality itself, has been revealed to be based on a fundamental misunderstanding. I see now that the peace I was seeking was never absent. I was simply looking for it in all the wrong places." Venerable kōans listened with the deep attention of a master who recognizes that his student has crossed a crucial threshold in their spiritual development. "Yes, Your Majesty," he said. "What you have discovered is what all the great sages throughout history have pointed toward, the recognition that our true nature is not the small, separate self that we usually take ourselves to be, but the vast, interconnected consciousness that is the source and substance of all existence. This understanding changes everything, because when you know who you really are, you naturally begin to live and act from a completely different foundation." The monk paused, allowing the significance of this teaching to settle into the king's awareness before continuing. "But I must also warn you, Your Majesty, that this experience, profound as it is just the beginning of your real spiritual journey. The glimpse of truth that you have received this morning must now be integrated into every aspect of your daily life. The challenge is not just to have these peak experiences in meditation, but to learn to live from this understanding in the midst of all the complexities and challenges of worldly existence." This teaching proved to be prophetic, for as the remaining days of the king's retreat unfolded, he discovered that maintaining the clarity and peace of that seventh morning required constant vigilance and practice. There were moments when the old patterns of thinking and reacting would reassert themselves, when the familiar anxieties and compulsions would arise to cloud his awareness. But now he had a reference point, a direct experience of his true nature that allowed him to recognize these temporary disturbances without being overwhelmed by them. Venerable kōans guided him through this process of integration with the skill of a master craftsman, helping to shape a precious work of art. He taught the king how to use the memory of his profound experience as an anchor, a way of returning to his center whenever he felt himself being pulled back into old patterns of reactivity and stress. "Your Majesty," the monk explained during one of their evening teaching sessions, "the experience you had on the seventh morning is like a seed that has been planted in the soil of your consciousness. But like any seed, it needs the right conditions to grow and flourish. It needs the water of daily practice, the sunlight of mindful awareness, and the fertile soil of a life lived in service to others. Without these conditions, even the most profound spiritual experience will remain just a beautiful memory rather than a living reality that transforms your entire existence." The king took these teachings to heart, dedicating himself with renewed intensity to the practices that would help him embody the wisdom he had received. He spent longer periods in meditation, learning to rest in the vast silence that he had discovered at the core of his being. He practiced mindful awareness throughout his daily activities, bringing the same quality of presence to simple tasks like eating and walking that he brought to formal meditation. Most importantly, he began to cultivate what Venerable Tish called the heart of service, the understanding that his spiritual development was not for his own benefit alone, but for the welfare of all beings. During the final week of his retreat, the king was given increasingly challenging tests of his ability to maintain his inner peace and clarity in the face of difficult circumstances. Venerable Tish arranged for him to receive a series of disturbing reports from his kingdom, news of natural disasters, political conflicts, economic problems, and other crises that would normally have sent him into a state of frantic worry and reactive planning. But instead of being overwhelmed by these challenges, the king found that he could receive even the most disturbing news with equanimity and respond with clear, wise action. He realized that his previous anxiety in the face of problems had not actually helped him to solve them more effectively. If anything, it had clouded his judgment and led to impulsive decisions that often made situations worse. Now, grounded in the deep peace he had discovered within himself, he could see each challenge as an opportunity to serve, each crisis as a chance to apply the wisdom and compassion he had cultivated. He began to understand that true leadership was not about avoiding problems or controlling outcomes, but about meeting whatever arose with presence, wisdom, and an unwavering commitment to the highest good of all. One particularly significant test came when he received news that one of his most trusted advisors had been discovered embezzling funds from the royal treasury. In the past, such a betrayal would have sent the king into a rage, leading to harsh punishment and a general atmosphere of suspicion and mistrust throughout the court. But now, instead of reacting with anger and vindictiveness, he found himself feeling a deep compassion for the advisor who had fallen into such destructive behavior. This man has caused great harm, the king reflected to Venerable Tish, but his actions arise from the same fundamental confusion and suffering that once drove my own behavior. He has forgotten his true nature and become lost in the illusion that happiness can be found through accumulating wealth and power. My response must be firm enough to prevent further harm and to uphold justice, but it must also be compassionate enough to offer him an opportunity for redemption and transformation. The monk smiled with deep satisfaction, recognizing that his student had truly internalized the most essential teaching of the spiritual path, the understanding that wisdom and compassion are not two separate qualities, but two aspects of the same awakened consciousness. Your Majesty, he said, you have learned the secret that all great leaders must discover, that true strength comes not from the ability to punish and control, but from the capacity to see clearly, act wisely, and respond to even the most challenging situations with an open heart. As the 21st day of his retreat arrived, King Devendra felt a profound sense of completion and gratitude. The man who had arrived at the monastery 3 weeks earlier as a desperate seeker had been transformed into someone who possessed an unshakable foundation of inner peace and wisdom. But more than that, he had discovered his true purpose as a leader, not to rule over others, but to serve the awakening of wisdom and compassion in all beings. On his final morning at the monastery, the king participated in a special ceremony that had been prepared by the entire monastic community. As the sun rose over the forest canopy, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and crimson, all the monks gathered in the central courtyard to offer their blessings and support for his return to worldly life. Venerable Tish spoke on behalf of the community, his words carrying the weight of profound wisdom and genuine love. Your Majesty, he said, you came to us as a student seeking to learn the way of peace, and you are leaving as a teacher who will share this way with countless others. Your transformation has been a gift not only to yourself, but to all of us who have witnessed the miracle of a human being awakening to their true nature. But remember, the monk continued, that your real work is just beginning. The monastery has been a protected environment where the conditions were ideal for inner development. Now you must learn to maintain and deepen this understanding in the midst of all the complexities and challenges of worldly existence. This is the ultimate test of spiritual realization, not whether you can find peace in a quiet meditation hall, but whether you can embody wisdom and compassion in the marketplace, in the palace, in the midst of conflict and crisis. The king listened to these words with deep humility and gratitude, understanding that he was receiving not just advice, but a sacred transmission of responsibility. He was being entrusted with the precious gift of wisdom, not to keep for himself, but to share with all those whose lives he would touch. As he prepared to leave the monastery and return to his kingdom, King Devendra made a solemn vow that would guide the rest of his life. "I promise," he said, addressing both the monastic community and the deeper intelligence that he could now sense underlying all of existence, "that I will dedicate my life to serving the awakening of wisdom and compassion in all beings. I will use whatever power and influence I possess, not for personal gain or glory, but for the welfare of all those who look to me for guidance and protection. I will remember always that true leadership is not about commanding obedience, but about inspiring others to discover their own inner wisdom. I will strive to create conditions in which all beings can flourish according to their highest potential, and I will never forget that the peace I have found within myself is not separate from the peace of the world, that by maintaining my own inner clarity and compassion, I contribute to the healing and awakening of all life." With these words, King Devendra mounted his elephant and began the journey back to his capital, carrying with him not just the memory of his transformative experience, but a living commitment to embody the wisdom he had received in every aspect of his leadership and governance. The return journey provided him with his first real test of his ability to maintain his inner peace while engaging with the demands and distractions of worldly life. Unlike the protected atmosphere of the monastery, the road was filled with noise, activity, and constant demands for his attention. Messengers arrived regularly with reports from the kingdom. Advisors sought his input on various decisions, and the simple logistics of traveling with a large retinue required constant coordination and problem-solving. But instead of being overwhelmed by these challenges, the king found that he could maintain his connection to the deep silence he had discovered within himself, even in the midst of great activity. He realized that the peace he had cultivated was indeed like the sky, vast enough to hold all the clouds of temporary experience without being disturbed by them. One particularly significant moment came on the second day of travel, when a messenger arrived with urgent news of a plague that had broken out in one of the kingdom's major cities. Hundreds of people were falling ill, trade had ground to a halt, and panic was beginning to spread to neighboring regions. In the past, such news would have sent the king into a state of frantic worry and reactive planning, leading to hasty decisions that might have made the situation worse. But now, drawing on the wisdom he had cultivated during his retreat, the king received this disturbing news with calm presence and clear thinking. He immediately called for his most trusted advisors and began to develop a comprehensive response that addressed not only the immediate medical crisis, but also the economic and social disruptions that were likely to follow. His approach was characterized by the same qualities that had marked his transformation at the monastery: patient listening, careful consideration of all aspects of the problem, and a deep commitment to the welfare of all those affected. Instead of simply issuing orders from a distance, he decided to travel immediately to the affected city to personally oversee the response efforts and to demonstrate his commitment to his people's welfare. When the royal party arrived at the plague-stricken city, they found a scene of chaos and despair. The streets were nearly empty, businesses were shuttered, and an atmosphere of fear and hopelessness pervaded the entire community. Many of the king's advisors urged him to maintain a safe distance from the affected areas, but he insisted on visiting the hospitals and treatment centers where the sick were being cared for. His presence in the midst of the crisis had an immediate and profound effect on the morale of both the medical workers and the patients themselves. Here was their king, the most powerful person in the realm, willingly exposing himself to the same dangers they faced, demonstrating through his actions that no one was expendable, that every life had value and dignity. But more than his physical presence, it was the quality of peace and confidence that he radiated that began to transform the atmosphere of the entire city. People who had been paralyzed by fear began to find the courage to help their neighbors. Medical workers who had been overwhelmed by the magnitude of the crisis found renewed energy and hope. Community leaders who had been paralyzed by indecision began to organize effective relief efforts. The king's response to the plague became a model of compassionate and effective leadership that would be studied and emulated for generations to come. He established emergency hospitals, organized the distribution of food and medicine, implemented public health measures to prevent the spread of disease, and created economic support systems for those whose livelihoods had been disrupted by the crisis. But perhaps most importantly, he maintained throughout the entire ordeal the same quality of inner peace and clarity that he had cultivated during his retreat. He made decisions not from a place of fear or panic, but from a deep understanding of what was needed for the highest good of all. He communicated not with the frantic energy of someone who was overwhelmed by circumstances, but with the calm authority of someone who was grounded in unshakable wisdom. The plague was eventually brought under control, but the impact of the king's response extended far beyond the immediate crisis. Word of his compassionate and effective leadership spread throughout the kingdom and beyond, inspiring other rulers to adopt similar approaches to governance. The city that had been devastated by disease became a model of community resilience and cooperation, with stronger social bonds and more effective institutions than had existed before the crisis. Most importantly, the king's own understanding of leadership was deepened and refined through this experience. He realized that the peace and wisdom he had discovered during his retreat were not just personal attainments to be cherished and protected, but practical tools that could be used to serve others in times of greatest need. Years passed, and King Devendra's reputation for wise and compassionate leadership continued to grow. His kingdom became known throughout the region as a place of justice, prosperity, and peace, where conflicts were resolved through dialogue rather than violence, where economic policies served the welfare of all rather than just the wealthy elite, and where the arts and sciences flourished under the patronage of a ruler who understood that true civilization was measured not by military might or material wealth, but by the cultivation of wisdom and compassion. But the king never forgot the source of his transformation, and he maintained throughout his life a deep commitment to the practices that had awakened him to his true nature. Each morning, before attending to any affairs of state, he spent time in meditation, reconnecting with the silence and peace that were the foundation of his effectiveness as a leader. Each evening, he reflected on the events of the day, examining his actions and decisions in the light of the wisdom he had received, always seeking to learn and grow from his experiences. He also established a tradition of regular retreats, returning to the monastery where his transformation had begun to deepen his understanding and to receive continued guidance from Venerable kōans. These retreats became legendary throughout the kingdom, as subjects marveled at a ruler who was willing to temporarily set aside the trappings of power in order to cultivate the inner qualities that made him truly powerful. During one particularly significant retreat, undertaken on the 10th anniversary of his original transformation, the king experienced another profound deepening of his understanding. As he sat in meditation in the same hall where he had first discovered the peace that changed his life, he was struck by a realization that brought tears of gratitude to his eyes. He understood that his entire journey from the desperate, anxiety-ridden ruler who had first sought out the monastery, through the profound transformation of his retreat, into the wise and compassionate leader he had become, was not really his personal story at all, but a universal tale of awakening that was available to every human being. The peace he had discovered was not his private possession, but the birthright of all conscious beings. The wisdom he had cultivated was not his personal achievement, but a natural expression of the intelligence that underlies all of existence. This understanding filled him with a profound sense of humility and responsibility. He realized that his role as a king was not to be a superior being ruling over inferior subjects, but to be a servant of the awakening process that was seeking to express itself through all of humanity. His kingdom was not his personal domain to be controlled and exploited, but a sacred trust to be stewarded for the benefit of all beings, present and future. With this deepened understanding, King Devendra began to implement even more radical changes in his approach to governance. He established councils of citizens from all walks of life to participate in decision-making processes. He created educational institutions that taught not just practical skills, but also the inner practices that support wisdom and compassion. He instituted economic policies that ensured that the benefits of prosperity were shared by all members of society, not just the wealthy elite. Most importantly, he began to prepare for his eventual succession in a way that would ensure that the wisdom-based approach to leadership would continue long after his own death. He established a council of advisors who were trained not just in the technical aspects of governance, but in the contemplative practices that support wise decision-making. He created institutions that would preserve and transmit the principles of compassionate leadership to future generations. His son, Prince Arjuna, was educated not just in the traditional arts of kingship, but in the deeper understanding that true power comes from service rather than domination, from wisdom rather than cleverness, from love rather than fear. Like his father before him, the prince spent extended periods at the monastery with Venerable kōans, learning to cultivate the inner stillness and clarity that would be essential for effective leadership. When the time came for King Devendra to pass the throne to his son, the transition was marked not by the usual anxiety and power struggles that characterize such moments, but by a sense of confident continuity. The kingdom's subjects trusted that their new ruler had been prepared not just to maintain the peace and prosperity they had enjoyed, but to continue the evolution toward ever greater wisdom and compassion in governance. In his final years, King Devendra often reflected on the extraordinary journey that had taken him from desperation to wisdom, from anxiety to peace, from selfish ambition to selfless service. He marveled at how a simple decision to seek help from a Buddhist monk had set in motion a chain of events that had transformed not just his own life, but the lives of countless others. During his last visit to the monastery, now as an elderly man whose body was frail, but whose spirit burned brighter than ever, he shared a final reflection with Venerable kōans that captured the essence of everything he had learned. "Master," he said, his voice weak but filled with profound gratitude, "when I first came to you all those years ago, I thought I was seeking a solution to my personal problems. I had no idea that what you were offering was not just healing for my individual suffering, but a path to the transformation of human consciousness itself. I have learned that the peace we seek is not a personal possession to be hoarded, but a universal gift to be shared. I have discovered that true leadership is not about commanding others, but about inspiring them to discover their own inner wisdom. Most importantly, I have come to understand that the greatest legacy any of us can leave is not monuments or wealth or even great deeds, but the awakening of wisdom and compassion in the hearts of those whose lives we touch. Venerable Thish An, now also advanced in years but still radiating the same timeless wisdom that had first attracted the king, smiled with deep satisfaction. "Your Majesty," he said, "you have become what every teacher hopes their student will become, not a follower or an imitator, but someone who has discovered their own authentic wisdom and learned to express it in service to the awakening of all beings. Your life has been a teaching in itself, a demonstration that transformation is possible for anyone who has the courage to look within and the commitment to serve something greater than their own small self." As the sun set on that final conversation between teacher and student, both men sat together in the comfortable silence that had been the foundation of their relationship from the very beginning. They understood that the most profound teachings are often transmitted not through words, but through the quality of presence that emerges when two beings meet in the depths of their shared humanity. And so, dear friend, as this long and winding story draws toward its close, we return once again to the fundamental truth that inspired King Devendra's transformation and that remains available to each of us in every moment of our lives. The peace we seek, the wisdom we long for, the love we crave, all of these are not distant goals to be achieved through struggle and effort, but present realities to be recognized and embraced through the simple practice of inner stillness. The story of King Devendra is not just an ancient tale from a distant land, but a mirror in which we can see our own potential for transformation. Like the king, we may have been searching for happiness and fulfillment in all the wrong places, in achievements and possessions, in the approval of others, in the constant stimulation and distraction that our modern world provides. But the peace we seek is not somewhere else, waiting to be found or earned or achieved. It is here, now, in this very moment, in the depths of our own being. The practice of silence that transformed the king's life is available to you as well. You don't need to retreat to a monastery for 3 weeks, though such an experience can certainly be valuable. You can begin right now, in this moment, by simply allowing yourself to rest in the natural silence that is always present beneath the surface activity of your mind. You can learn to pause before reacting, to listen more deeply, to speak less, but with greater wisdom and compassion. You can discover that true power comes not from the ability to control external circumstances, but from the capacity to remain centered and peaceful, regardless of what is happening around you. You can find that the greatest gift you can give to others is not your knowledge or your wealth or your achievements, but your presence, the quality of peaceful awareness that emerges when you are fully here, fully awake, fully alive. As you drift now into the deepest and most restorative sleep, let the story of King Devendra's transformation be a gentle reminder of your own potential for inner peace and wisdom. Let the silence that surrounds you now be not an absence, but a presence, the presence of your own true nature, which is inherently peaceful, inherently wise, inherently whole. You don't need to create this peace, or earn it or achieve it. You need only to recognize it, to rest in it, to allow it to be the foundation of your life. Like the king in our story, you have the capacity to transform not only your own existence, but the lives of everyone around you, simply by learning to abide in the peace that is your deepest nature. Rest now in the profound silence that is your birthright. Rest in the understanding that beneath all the noise and activity of daily life, there is a place of perfect stillness that can never be disturbed. Rest in the knowledge that you are held in the same eternal love that guided King Devendra from desperation to wisdom, from anxiety to peace, from selfish ambition to selfless service. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of silence. If this story has brought you comfort and insight, we invite you to share it with others who may be seeking the same peace that you have found tonight. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of transformation and wisdom, and remember that each time you choose silence over noise, peace over agitation, presence over distraction, you are contributing to the healing and awakening of our world. Sleep now, dear friend. Sleep deeply and peacefully, knowing that you are held in the same eternal silence that transformed a restless king into a wise and compassionate ruler. May your dreams be filled with the light of understanding, and may you wake tomorrow with a deeper appreciation for the profound power of sacred silence. Good night, and may you rest in perfect peace. And now, as we prepare to close this sacred circle of story and silence, let us take a moment to reflect on the profound journey we have shared together. Through the tale of King Devendra's transformation, we have explored the deepest mysteries of human consciousness, the hidden sources of true peace and wisdom, and the extraordinary potential that lies dormant within each of us, waiting to be awakened by the gentle touch of silence. The king's story is our story, for we all carry within us the same restless seeking that drove him to the monastery, the same capacity for transformation that allowed him to discover his true nature, and the same responsibility to share whatever wisdom we gain in service to the awakening of all beings. Whether we are rulers of kingdoms or simply rulers of our own small domains of influence, we all have the opportunity to choose between the path of reactive anxiety and the path of responsive wisdom, between the tyranny of compulsive thinking and the freedom of conscious awareness. In our modern world, filled with noise and distraction, with constant demands for our attention and endless streams of information competing for our consciousness, the practice of sacred silence has never been more necessary or more challenging. We live in an age where the ability to be still, to listen deeply, to rest in the present moment has become almost a lost art. We have forgotten how to be alone with ourselves without immediately reaching for some form of entertainment or stimulation. But the story of King Devendra reminds us that this capacity for inner stillness is not lost. It is simply buried beneath layers of conditioning and habit. Like a spring of fresh water that has been covered over by debris, the source of peace within us continues to flow, waiting for us to clear away the obstacles that prevent us from accessing its life-giving waters. The practice of silence is not about becoming passive or withdrawn from life, but about discovering the source of truly effective action. When we learn to act from a place of inner stillness rather than reactive compulsion, our actions become more precise, more appropriate, more beneficial to ourselves and others. We stop wasting energy on unnecessary activities and begin to focus our efforts on what truly matters. Like King Devendra, we may discover that speaking less allows our words to carry more weight, that listening more deeply enables us to hear what others are really trying to communicate, that pausing before reacting gives us access to wisdom that is not available to the agitated mind. We may find that the peace we cultivate within ourselves becomes a gift that we offer to everyone we encounter, creating ripples of calm and clarity that extend far beyond our immediate sphere of influence. The transformation that took place in the king's life did not happen overnight, and neither will ours. It is a gradual process of awakening, a gentle unfolding of our true nature that requires patience, commitment, and compassion for ourselves as we navigate the inevitable challenges and setbacks that are part of any genuine spiritual journey. There will be days when the old patterns of anxiety and reactivity reassert themselves, when the noise of the world seems to drown out the whisper of inner wisdom, when the peace we have touched seems as distant as a half-remembered dream. In these moments, we can remember King Devendra's example and trust that the silence we have tasted is not gone, but simply temporarily obscured by the clouds of temporary experience. The monastery where the king underwent his transformation represents the sacred space that exists within each of us, a place of refuge and renewal that we can access regardless of our external circumstances. This inner monastery is always available to us, always ready to receive us with the same unconditional acceptance and profound peace that welcomed the troubled king so many centuries ago. We don't need to travel to distant lands or spend weeks in formal retreat to access this inner sanctuary, though such experiences can certainly be valuable. We can create moments of sacred silence in the midst of our daily lives, a few minutes of quiet reflection before starting the day, a pause to breathe deeply and center ourselves before entering a challenging meeting, a moment of gratitude and presence before falling asleep at night. These small practices, maintained consistently over time, can gradually transform our entire relationship with life. Like drops of water that eventually wear away the hardest stone, moments of conscious silence can slowly dissolve the patterns of stress and reactivity that have kept us trapped in cycles of suffering and dissatisfaction. The wisdom that King Devendra discovered is not the exclusive property of ancient kings or Buddhist monks, but the birthright of every conscious being. It is the recognition that our true nature is not the small, separate self that we usually take ourselves to be, but the vast, interconnected awareness that is the source and substance of all existence. When we touch this deeper reality, even briefly, everything changes. Our problems don't necessarily disappear, but our relationship to them is transformed. We discover that we are much larger than our difficulties, much more resilient than our fears, much more capable of love and wisdom than we ever imagined possible. This understanding brings with it a profound sense of responsibility and opportunity. Like King Devendra, we realize that whatever peace and wisdom we cultivate is not for our own benefit alone, but for the welfare of all those whose lives we touch. We become servants of the awakening process that is seeking to express itself through humanity, contributors to the healing and transformation of our world. As you rest now in the gentle embrace of approaching sleep, allow yourself to feel the presence of this deeper reality that the king discovered in his retreat. It is not separate from you or distant from you, it is the very essence of who you are, the unchanging awareness in which all the changing experiences of your life take place. You don't need to understand it intellectually or grasp it with your thinking mind. You need only to rest in it, to allow yourself to be held by the same eternal silence that transformed a desperate ruler into a wise and compassionate leader. This silence is your true home, your deepest refuge, your most reliable source of guidance and strength. Let the story of King Devendra's journey be a gentle reminder that transformation is always possible, that peace is always available, that wisdom is always present, waiting to be discovered in the depths of your own being. You have everything you need within you right now to begin your own journey into the heart of silence, your own adventure in the discovery of who you really are, beneath all the roles and identities that you wear in the world. Sleep now, dear friend, knowing that you are held in the same love that guided the king, from suffering to freedom, from confusion to clarity, from separation to unity. May your dreams be filled with the light of understanding, and may you wake tomorrow with a deeper appreciation for the sacred silence that is always available to you, always ready to welcome you home to yourself. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the profound mystery of inner transformation. If this story has touched your heart and brought you peace, we invite you to share it with others who may be seeking the same refuge from the storms of life that you have found tonight. Subscribe to our channel for more stories of wisdom and awakening, and remember that each moment of silence you create is a gift not only to yourself, but to all of life. Rest well, sleep deeply, and may you always remember that the peace you seek is not somewhere else, but here, now, in the eternal silence of your own true nature. Good night, and may you be blessed with the deepest and most restorative sleep, cradled in the infinite love and wisdom that is your birthright and your home. Before we part ways tonight, let us linger for just a moment longer in this sacred space we have created together, this sanctuary of story and silence where transformation becomes possible and healing flows like a gentle river through the landscape of consciousness. In sharing the tale of King Devendra's awakening, we have participated in something far more significant than mere entertainment or even education. We have engaged in the ancient and holy practice of transmission, the passing of wisdom from heart to heart, from soul to soul, across the boundaries of time and space. The power of such stories lies not merely in their ability to inform or inspire, but in their capacity to awaken within us the recognition of our own deepest truth. When we hear of the king's journey from restlessness to peace, from anxiety to wisdom, from selfish ambition to selfless service, something within us stirs with recognition. We sense that this is not just his story, but our story as well, the universal tale of consciousness, awakening to its own true nature. In the Buddhist tradition from which this story emerges, there is a beautiful teaching about the interconnectedness of all beings, the understanding that the awakening of one person contributes to the awakening of all, that the peace discovered by one individual becomes part of the collective healing of humanity. King Devendra's transformation was not an isolated event, but a ripple in the vast ocean of consciousness that continues to spread outward, touching lives and inspiring transformation across the centuries. Tonight, as you have listened to his story, you have become part of this continuing wave of awakening. The peace that he discovered in the silence of the monastery is the same peace that is available to you in this moment. The wisdom that transformed his approach to leadership is the same wisdom that can transform your approach to whatever responsibilities and relationships fill your life. Whether you are a parent seeking to guide your children with greater patience and understanding, a teacher hoping to inspire your students to discover their own inner wisdom, a healer working to bring comfort and restoration to those who suffer, or simply a human being trying to navigate the complexities of modern life with greater grace and authenticity, the principles that guided King Devendra's transformation can guide yours as well. The practice of sacred silence is not a luxury reserved for monks and mystics, but a practical necessity for anyone who wishes to live with genuine effectiveness and deep fulfillment. In our hyper-connected world, where the pace of change seems to accelerate daily and the demands on our attention multiply exponentially, the ability to find stillness within ourselves becomes not just valuable, but essential for our psychological and spiritual survival. Like King Devendra, we may discover that the solutions to our most pressing problems are not to be found in doing more, but in being more. Not in adding new activities to our already overcrowded schedules, but in bringing a new quality of presence and awareness to whatever we are already doing. The transformation we seek may not require dramatic changes in our external circumstances, but rather a fundamental shift in our internal relationship to those circumstances. This shift begins with the simple recognition that we always have a choice about how to respond to whatever life presents to us. We can react from a place of anxiety and compulsion, driven by unconscious patterns and conditioned responses, or we can respond from a place of conscious awareness, drawing on the deep wisdom and compassion that are our birthright as conscious beings. The pause that King Devendra learned to create between stimulus and response, that moment of conscious breathing, of reconnection with inner stillness, of remembering who he really was beneath all the roles and identities he wore, is available to each of us in every moment of our lives. It is in this pause that transformation becomes possible, that wisdom can emerge, that love can flow freely from the depths of our being. As you prepare now to surrender to the healing embrace of sleep, carry with you the understanding that this pause, this sacred space of conscious awareness, goes with you into your dreams and will be waiting for you when you wake. The monastery of inner silence that King Devendra discovered is not a place you visit occasionally, but a dimension of your own being that you can access at any time, under any circumstances. In your dreams tonight, you may find yourself walking the peaceful pathways of that ancient monastery, sitting in meditation with the wise monks who dedicated their lives to the cultivation of wisdom and compassion, listening to the gentle teachings of Venerable Teach, An, as he guides you deeper into the mystery of your own true nature. These dream experiences are not mere fantasies, but genuine encounters with the archetypal energies of wisdom and transformation that live within the collective unconscious of humanity. When you wake tomorrow morning, you may find that something has shifted within you, that the story of King Devendra's transformation has planted seeds of possibility in the fertile soil of your consciousness. These seeds may not sprout immediately. Transformation is often a gradual process that unfolds in its own perfect timing, but they will grow and flourish if you nurture them with the water of daily practice and the sunlight of conscious attention. Remember that every moment offers you the opportunity to choose silence over noise, presence over distraction, wisdom over reactivity. Each time you make this choice, you strengthen your capacity to live from the depths of your being, rather than the surface of your personality. Each time you pause to breathe consciously, to listen deeply, to respond rather than react, you contribute to the healing and awakening of our world. The legacy of King Devendra's transformation lives on not in monuments or historical records, but in the continuing possibility of awakening that exists within every human heart. His story reminds us that no matter how lost we may feel, no matter how overwhelming our circumstances may seem, no matter how deeply we may be trapped in patterns of suffering and confusion, the potential for radical transformation is always present, always available, always waiting to be activated by our sincere desire for truth and our willingness to surrender to the wisdom that lies beyond our ordinary understanding. As this long and winding tale draws to its close, rest now in the profound silence that has been its true subject all along. This silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of peace itself, the vast, open awareness in which all sounds arise and pass away, the unchanging background against which all the changing experiences of life take place. You are this silence. You are this peace. You are this love, not as concepts to be understood intellectually, but as living realities to be experienced directly in the depths of your own being. The King's journey was a journey home to this truth, and your journey, whether you are just beginning to sense its possibility or have been walking its pathways for many years, is the same journey, the eternal return to the source of all wisdom, all peace, all love. Sleep now, beloved friend, cradled in the infinite tenderness of this understanding. Let the story of transformation that we have shared tonight become a living presence in your dreams, a gentle guide leading you ever deeper into the mystery of who you really are. And when you wake, may you carry with you the unshakable knowing that the peace you have touched tonight is not a temporary experience, but your permanent inheritance, your deepest truth, your eternal home. Thank you for this sacred time together. Thank you for your willingness to listen not just with your ears, but with your heart. Thank you for being part of the continuing story of awakening that began long before any of us were born and will continue long after our individual stories have ended. May you be blessed with the deepest rest, the most healing dreams, and the most peaceful awakening. Good night, and may you always remember the profound power of sacred silence. And so, as the final words of this sacred story settle into the silence from which they arose, we complete our journey together through the transformative landscape of King Devendra's awakening, in the gentle rhythm of your breathing, in the soft beating of your heart, in the quiet spaces between your thoughts. The same eternal silence that changed a restless ruler into a wise and compassionate leader continues to offer its healing presence to you. This silence is your constant companion, your most faithful friend, your deepest teacher. It asks nothing of you except your willingness to rest in its embrace. It offers you everything: peace beyond understanding, wisdom beyond knowledge, love beyond measure. Tonight, as you surrender to sleep, you surrender also to this infinite silence that is your true home, your deepest nature, your most authentic self. May you sleep in perfect peace, and may you wake with the gentle strength that comes from knowing who you really are. The story continues in your dreams, in your awakening, in every moment of conscious presence you bring to the gift of this precious human life. Rest well, dear friend, held always in the sacred silence that transforms all things.